how the richest democracy in the world abandons Americans. And what got me started on this was last weekend I was watching TV, and I guess I was in a curmudgeonly mood because I was like questioning everything. What? You know, how can they? And suddenly this commercial comes on for a company that buys life insurance policies. And there's this older couple in the commercial, and one of them says, you know, to the camera, or says to the other, you know, we learned that we could sell our policy when a friend did so to pay their medical bills. And I'm going, wait a minute. We're the richest country in the world. The richest billionaires in the world. We have more money than anybody. I mean, we got more money than God. It's just, the United States is a fabulously rich nation. And senior citizens are having to sell their life insurance policies, depriving their children of any kind of inheritance or you know, benefit, you know, help at all, just to stay alive, just to pay their medical bills. And you know, I thought this isn't right. You know, you don't have people having to sell their life insurance policies in Taiwan or in South Korea or in Japan or in Costa Rica or in any of the European Union countries, because the total number of people who went bankrupt because somebody got sick in those countries is zero. It's 500,000 people every year in the United States. So I'm looking at this ad going, wow, this is really an ad about how sick and dysfunctional America's, you know, our healthcare system is. Why is that? In fact, you know, I posted this over at HartmannReport.com, and one of the people who reads our newsletter posted a reply saying that he's recovering from COVID and has been binge watching TV, and he's been binge watching Breaking Bad. And it's been a long time since Breaking Bad was a hot thing, you know. But the premise is that this guy had cancer. This high school science teacher, he had cancer, and he needed a lot of money to pay for his treatment, because this is America, right? And we don't have a national health care system. And so he started cooking meth to pay for his cancer treatment. It's just, you know, how do we miss this stuff, right? Then another ad comes out for a company that sells reverse mortgages. Now, you know, Tom Selleck, I'm sure, is a very nice guy, but are there really that many seniors who are now destitute and thus must wipe out the largest store of their wealth and their children's inheritance just to retire? Then came an ad for the Shriners Hospital for Children. And, you know, they're doing wonderful work, right? Taking care of kids who are born with birth defects and deformities. But why are we crowdsourcing health care for children in crisis? Why isn't that just like routinely provided for with our tax dollars? And then there was this ad for Danny Thomas's hospital, you know, the one that he started. And now this one is dealing with kids with cancer, and they're doing a lot of great cancer research, and God bless them. But again, why aren't we all funding stuff like this? Why do we need this in the richest country in the world? I mean, why don't we just have billionaires pay their income taxes? Oh, that's right. Since the Reagan Revolution, billionaires no longer pay income taxes for all practical purposes. And then that ad was followed by another one for colostrum. It's a milk product that is supposed to boost your immune system. And the ad's pitch lady said something like, there are over 90,000 chemicals in our environment that haven't been tested for toxicity. And damn, I thought she's right. Most of the developed world uses the precautionary principle. You've got to prove something's safe before you put it in our food supply. That's how it works in Europe. But here in the United States, you don't have to prove anything. You just pour it on, you know, dump it in the air, put it in the water, put it in their food. You know, line the packages that we get our take-home food with PFAS chemicals. No big deal. We'll just, you know, we'll continue poisoning people until finally we get sued. That's how it works in America. It's the libertarian strategy. I mean, watch Dark Waters, you know, the movie with Mark Ruffalo, if you want to see how this works, how the DuPont poisoned an entire community. And then in the next commercial break, Jeff Bridges comes on. He's a great guy. He's a great actor. And he's pitching a charity called No Kid Hungry, which turns out is a very, you know, it's a high-quality charity with a really good rating. But again, why do we have kids who are hungry in America? 1 in 5 American children is either suffering from hunger or malnutrition right now in the richest country in the world. It costs us an estimated $167 billion a year because of the damage that's being done to the brains and bodies of these kids. It costs us $167 billion a year, and the total cost to end all childhood poverty in the United States is or hunger in the United States is $25 billion. The amount of money that Musk, Bezos, Gates, and Zuckerberg added to their money bins just since 2020 is over $300 billion. We could end childhood poverty in the United States with $25 billion. But, you know, we could save $167 billion with a $25 billion investment, but we don't because it would require billionaires to pay their taxes. And how did we get there? How did we get to this point? Well, it's because 5 corrupt Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court legalized bribery. They legalized corporate bribery in 1978 with the Bilotti decision. They legalized basically all political bribery in 2010 with Citizens United. And of course, in 76, there was Buckley versus Vallejo. And the result of that is that, well, here, this is Judd Legum's newsletter today, popular.info. The average American family last year, in 2020, paid an effective tax rate of 13.6%. That's average, right? Some people paying a whole lot, some people paying nothing at all. So the average was 13.6%. General Electric reported $7 billion in profits last year. They got a refund of $423 million. They didn't pay taxes on their profits. They got a refund. T-Mobile reported $10 billion in profits last year. They paid $42 million in federal income taxes, 0.4%. Tesla, $3.2 billion in profits. They paid $48 million in federal income taxes, 1.5%. In 2020, quote, 55 of the largest corporations in America paid no federal corporate income taxes, despite enjoying substantial pre-tax profits in the United States. So what does this have to do with the Supreme Court? Well, the Supreme Court said that if you're rich or if you're a corporation, you can buy your very own politician. And those politicians then will introduce legislation to make sure that you never have to pay taxes. I mean, this is where we're at now. We've got, you know, the rich getting richer. We are now the most unequal society in the developed world. And it's all because 5 corrupted billionaires on the U.S., or 5 corrupted Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court, who are being spiffed by billionaires, buying them vacations, buying them homes for their parents, buying tuition for their kids, flying them around the world on private jets, taking them out on their super yachts, because 5 corrupt Republicans on the Supreme Court decided to legalize political bribery. If Democrats take power in this November, all 3 branches, or all 2 branches, all 3 parts, we've got to do something about it. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
For the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, it's Waking the Witch, Reflections on Women, Magic, and Power by Pam Grossman. This is from the introduction. Witches have always walked among us, populating societies and storyscapes across the globe for thousands of years. From Circe to Hermione, from Morgan Le Fay to Marie Laveau, the witch has long existed in the tales we tell about ladies with strange powers who can harm or heal. And although people of all genders have been considered witches, it's a word that is now usually associated with women. Throughout most of history, she has someone to fear, an uncanny other who threatens our safety or manipulates reality for her own mercurial purposes. She's a pariah, a persona non grata, a boogie woman to defeat and discard. Although she's often been deemed a destructive entity, in actuality, a witchy woman has historically been far more susceptible to attack than an inflictor of violence herself. As with other terrifying outsiders, she occupies a paradoxical role in cultural consciousness as both vicious aggressor and vulnerable prey. Over the past 150 years or so, however, the witch has done another magic trick by turning from a fright into a figure of inspiration. She is now as likely to be the heroine of your favorite TV show as she is its villain. She might show up in the form of your Wiccan co-worker or the beloved musician who gives off a sorceress vibe in videos or on stage. There's also a chance that she is you, and that witch is an identity you've taken upon yourself for any number of reasons, heartfelt or flippant, public or private. Today, more women than ever are choosing the way of the witch, whether literally or symbolically. They're floating down catwalks and sidewalks in gauzy black clothing and adorning themselves with Pinterest-worthy pentagrams and crystals. They're filling up movie theaters to watch witchy films and gathering in back rooms and backyards to do rituals, consult tarot cards, and set life-altering intentions. They're marching in the streets with Hex the Patriarchy placards and casting spells each month to try to constrain the commander-in-chief. Year after year, articles keep proclaiming it's the season of the witch, as journalists try to wrap their heads around the mushrooming witch trend. And all of this begs the question, why? Why do witches matter? Why are they seemingly everywhere right now? What exactly are they? And why the hell won't they go away? I get asked such things over and over, and you would think that after a lifetime of studying and writing about witches, as well as hosting a witch-themed podcast and being a practitioner of witchcraft myself, my answers would be succinct. In fact, I find that the more I work with the witch, the more complex she becomes. Hers is a slippery spirit. Try to pin her down and she'll only recede further into the dark, deep wood. I do know this for sure, though. Show me your witches, and I'll show you your feelings about women. The fact that the resurgence of feminism and the popularity of the witch are ascending at the same time is no coincidence. The two are reflections of each other. That said, this current witch wave is nothing new. I was a teen in the 1990s, the decade that brought us such pop culture as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Charmed, and The Craft. Not to mention riot girls and third-wave feminists who taught me that female power could come in a variety of colors and sexualities. I learned that women could lead a revolution while wearing lipstick and combat boots, and sometimes even a cloak. But my own witchly awakening came at an even earlier age. Morganville, New Jersey, where I was raised, was a solidly suburban town, but it retained enough natural land features back then to still feel a little bit scruffy in spots. We had a small patch of woods in our backyard that abutted a horse farm, and the two were separated by a wisp of running water that we could cross via a plank of wood. When we were little, my older sister Emily and I would sometimes venture to the other side where we could feed the horses, an act that still scares me to this day, and pick fistfuls of clover. But the majority of our time was spent on our side of the stream, threading ourselves through the thicket of trees that served as our personal forest. In one corner of the yard, a giant puddle would form whenever it rained, surrounded by a border of ferns. We called this spot our magical place. That it would vanish and then reappear only added to its mystery. It was a portal to the unknown. These woods are where I first remember doing magic, entering that state of deep play where imaginative action becomes reality. I would spend hours out there creating rituals with rocks and sticks, drawing secret symbols in the dirt, losing all track of time. It was a space that felt holy and wild, yet still strangely safe. As we age, we're supposed to stop filling our heads with such nonsense. Unicorns are to be traded in for Barbie dolls, though both are mythical creatures to be sure. We lose our tooth fairies, walk away from our wizards. Dragons get slain on the altar of our youth. Most kids grow out of their magic phase. I grew further into mine. My grandma Trudy was a librarian at the West Long Branch Library, which meant I got to spend many a long afternoon lurking between the 001.9 and 135 Dewey Decimal sections, reading about Bigfoot and dream interpretation in Nostradamus. Waking the Witch by Pam Grossman.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy World Amateur Radio Day. Seriously, it is. The American Radio Relay League. In fact, I just got a note from somebody in Hawaii who says, "Hey, let's talk on Morse code." So, yeah, I've talked with several of our listeners on the air. Anyhow, a lot going on in the world today. Putin, Trump, Iran, and Netanyahu unveil the terrifying perils of strongman rule. We'll get to that in just a moment. Also, there's a new secret internal Russian intelligence document that has been leaked somehow. The American press got a hold of it, and it just explicitly lays out what they're trying to do via people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, trying to weaken and ultimately destroy America. As a good news alert, by the way, in 30 out of the last 38 days, 100% of the sixth largest economy in the world's power came from renewable non-nuclear sources. I'll tell you about that in this first hour. And a crazy alert, House Dems file a bill to make Marjorie Taylor Greene Putin's special envoy to Congress. Seriously. At the top of our second hour, Phil Ittner is going to drop by, our friend, the war correspondent based out of Kyiv, Ukraine. We'll get an update on what's going on with that. Also, Arizona Republicans who have been saying, oh, this 1864 total ban on abortion, we don't like that. It's not a good idea. We're going to repeal that. And then every time a Democrat introduces legislation to repeal it, the Republicans vote against it. They did it again yesterday. Brilliant. Also, a be careful alert. A U.S. man returns from Europe to a $143,000 T-Mobile bill for using his phone overseas. Can that happen to you? You betcha. At the top of our third hour, my colleague Dean Obeidallah, who has his own show right here on Sirius XM, will be dropping by. He's got a new article in his newsletter about how MAGA is tampering with the Trump jury. And I've been wanting to ask Dean a couple of legal questions. He's a New York, he's a lawyer who I believe is a member of the New York bar, or maybe the New Jersey bar, but he's familiar with the law in that neck of the woods. And also in the third hour, a grifter alert. Republicans, if you want to use Donald Trump's name, face, picture, anything, he wants a commission, because of course he does. And more good news, the Maine legislature has passed sweeping gun safety laws in an all-night session. I'll tell you about that in the third hour of the program. But to start out, the title of my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com is about Putin, Trump, Iran, and Netanyahu unveiling the terrifying perils of strongman rule. And, I tell this story, well, first of all, the most amazing thing about Donald Trump's trial is that it's even happening. This is something that would not happen in Hungary. It would not happen in Russia. It would not happen in Iran or Turkey or China. In those countries run by authoritarian strongmen, do not see their leaders put on trial until or unless there's, basically a coup. And that's not going to happen here. So it's pretty amazing. I mean, Trump has said that if he becomes president again, he's going to make sure that this kind of trial never, ever happens. He wants absolute immunity for himself and his cronies. In fact, he's going to argue that before the Supreme Court next week. I believe it's next week, April 25th. I think that's next Thursday. Thank you, Sean. And, you know, if he has his way, nobody aligned with him will ever again be prosecuted. These countries, you know, Hungary, Russia, Iran, Turkey, China, they're all run by strongmen. The men that Trump openly admires and aspires to be, as apparently does Benjamin Netanyahu. And the irony about strongman leaders is that they're generally not strong people. They use violence and rhetoric to mask their own fear and weakness. I saw the first time in my life I saw the consequences of strongman rule was in the late 70s, or maybe 1980, 79 or 80. I went into Uganda at the tail end of the war that the Tanzanians had come in and kicked out Idi Amin. And, you know, we were bringing in food and medicine to deal with the famine up in the Karamoja region. And as Idi Amin and his 30 wives and concubines were firmly and pleasantly ensconced for the rest of his life in a mansion in Saudi Arabia. But this is what authoritarian leaders do. They pillage their countries for their own benefit. They elevate their crooked oligarch buddies, and they build alliances of mutual dependence with the most powerful people in the political and business classes. You know, like Trump getting millions, billions from Russians. And putting corrupt billionaires in his cabinet, you know, whose colleagues are now in turn funding his campaign, or Ivanka getting millions in patents from China, or Jared Kushner sucking up to a murderous Saudi prince and walking away with $2 billion just months later. You know, Vladimir Putin has extracted tens of billions of dollars from his country, Russia, and whenever his buddies, the Russian oligarchs, get out of line, they fall out of 13th floor, you know, 12th floor windows. Or they emigrate to Israel. It's the most common destination for Russian billionaires. Along those lines, Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu has been charged with bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. He's alleged to have given millions of dollars, billions of dollars worth of regulatory relief to an Israeli media billionaire in exchange for that media billionaire devoting all the, you know, very, very favorable media coverage to Netanyahu. And now, you know, after meeting with envoys from the UK and Germany and hearing President Biden say, just take the win, Bibi, Netanyahu this morning said basically he's reserving the option of a violent response to Iran's response to his, you know, bombing sovereign Iranian territory, their embassy or their consulate in Syria. It sure looks to me like this is just, you know, Netanyahu and Iran, both of them benefit from a war between the two of them as long as it doesn't become an all-out war. And, you know, dancing that dance is a very, very dangerous thing for the world and frankly, for Israel and Iran. So, you know, where do we go with this? Well, you know, Putin is trying to steal the resources of Ukraine. Trump wants to finish the job he started, turning America into an illiberal democracy. Iran's mullahs and Netanyahu are engaged in this symbiotic, high-stakes mutual violation of international law to hang on to power. I mean, it's been going on forever, right? And it doesn't always lead to war. I was in the Philippines years ago when Ferdy Marcos got deposed. And he, you know, in fact, I got knocked off. I had a reservation on a Philippine Airlines plane to come back to the United States. And 5 days in a row, I showed up at the airport and got bumped off my flight because Marcos and all of his cronies were fleeing to Hawaii. The flight stopped in Hawaii on its way to Los Angeles. They just took the airline. I mean, you know, it was a state airline. But Marcos was so desperate to hang on to power, he'd had, you know, his opponent assassinated when he came back into the country. But he didn't have a big enough military to go to war with somebody, you know, unlike Iran and Russia and now Israel. So here we are. You know, we've got this conflict, and it has the potential to do some real damage. President Biden reached out to Netanyahu day before yesterday and said, please take the win, right? You know, Iran threw all these missiles and things at you. Every single one got shot out of the air. The only injury in Israel was a Bedouin girl who was injured when some debris from a rocket that had been shot down fell on her community. And I mean, that was it. And basically, you know, Netanyahu started it by bombing Iranian sovereign territory. I guarantee you, if Iran had bombed an Israeli embassy anywhere in the world, the response would have been pretty ferocious. So, you know, Netanyahu says to Iran, hey, let's have a fight. And Iran says, okay, cool, here you go. And now they're doing this dance that benefits both of them, frankly. And it concerns, I think, frankly, the rest of us. Without exception, when authoritarian leaders come to power, whether it's by election or violent overthrow, the little people suffer, whether it's from theft or corruption or even war, or all three. I mean, this was the great lesson of the 1930s. So hopefully Israel will return to democracy soon with new elections. Ukraine will get the aid it needs to repel Putin's army. Johnson's talking about a vote on Saturday. And America will turn away from Trump's authoritarianism. And if not, if those three things don't happen, the world is in for a hell of a painful time. We'll be right back, 16 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Cheryl in Clarksville, Georgia. Hey, Cheryl, what's on your mind today?
I'm calling about the Postal Service in Georgia. There was a hearing Tuesday with the Senate committee with John Ossoff and our friend Louis DeJoy.
Oh,
and there was a major thing that's going on besides the lady who called yesterday. I tried to call in yesterday and I couldn't get in. This is going on across the country. It started, from what I understand, in Richmond, Virginia last summer. And this is irritating not only Democrats but Republicans. This is part of a 10-year plan, so this is a big deal.
Right. He's trying to set the post office up for privatization. He wants to.
Yes, and what it is, it's a transition and consolidation of local processing and distribution centers, PDC. And so they closed regional processing centers and put them into a large, they moved it for North and Metro Atlanta, North Georgia and Metro Atlanta to a center below the airport, Atlanta Airport. And so it is causing huge problems. And so, like I said, there was a hearing, but I didn't get to see anything about it because it wasn't covered even on C-SPAN. So the only clip I saw of DeJoy testifying on that committee was blaming the underlings. And so he's fine with the program. He just blamed the people below him. He likes the program. He just passed the buck.
Yeah.
And so he's fine with this. And so it's causing huge problems for not just rural people, but we depend a lot on the Postal Service. So you would think that Republicans who want this, privatization would understand that a lot of their constituents are rural people. So it's causing problems for small businesses, for people who can't get their medicines, for invitations, for, anything that you need Postal Service for. So it's driving, my representative is, unfortunately, Andrew Clyde. And so they are driving him nuts. They're calling Senator Ossoff. So Ossoff was on this committee. Senator Warnock was not part of this committee. But as I said, I haven't really gotten a readout on it because I couldn't find anything except the local Atlanta channels just did that little blip with DeJoy being very arrogant, as he usually is.
Right.
And I will get a report. I've got a report here from, this has been going on since February here in Georgia.
Yeah.
So I have clips from my local
people
newspaper.
need to be calling the Senate. They're calling their two senators and raising hell because
Biden's got a nominee, and that nominee is not moving forward right now in the Senate. And, that's up to Chuck Schumer and the Democrats, frankly. They've got to do something.
So it's called Delivering for America, DeJoy's 10-year plan to transform and modernize the Postal Service into a more financially sound and efficient agency, supposedly.
Right.
So it is closing. But the only thing I haven't heard from any of my local media is what happened to the workers when they closed these regional centers. So it's impacting the customers, of course, but I don't know what happened to those workers, so I think about them also.
Yeah, I'm with you, Cheryl. Cheryl, thank you for the call, and spot on.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is a national crisis, frankly. Thank you, Cheryl.
Yes, it is, because this is going all over the multiple states.
Yeah, and it's going to really mess with the election, which was the original point of the whole thing.
I can only speak for myself, but I was going to vote absentee. Well, I will not do that this time.
Yeah, wise choice, Cheryl. Thank you. 20 minutes past the hour. I'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Well, the prosecutors are claiming now that Donald Trump violated the gag order 7 more times since Monday. This morning they made another filing. He's called, the gag order specifically said you can't talk about witnesses or jurors. He's called Michael Cohen a serial perjurer. He's alleged that undercover liberal activists are lying to the judge to get on the jury, this via Jesse Waters. Emil Bove, one of Trump's lawyers, says that Cohen has been attacking Trump in connection with the campaign, and therefore Trump's comments are related to the campaign. Right. But anyhow, what Mayor Sean said is that he's not going to rule on this today. He's just going to get the damn jury seated, and he's going to rule on it next week. I believe it's next Tuesday, that, he's going to decide what the penalties will be. I don't know if he's like giving Trump all the rope he wants, and then, he's going to hang him with it legally or what. But keep an eye on this one. Also, Russia, this big story in the Washington Post this week. It was broke yesterday by Catherine Belton. Russia's foreign ministry has been drawing up plans, she writes, to try to weaken its Western adversaries, including the United States, and leverage the Ukraine war to forge a global order free from what it sees as American dominance. This document is called Foreign Policy Concept of the Russian Federation. It calls for an offensive information campaign against a, quote, coalition of unfriendly countries led by the United States. They write in this document, it's important to create a mechanism for finding the vulnerable points of external and internal policies, American, with the aim of developing practical steps to weaken Russia's opponents. Many in the Moscow elite say this has become a hybrid war against us, trying to disrupt the domestic politics of the United States and European countries through supporting isolationist and extremist politicians and policies. And Russia wants to draw closer to China, Iran, and North Korea to try to shift the balance of world power. A new axis is forming. And they're working really hard to basically unravel the old alliance, the United States and Europe, and NATO.
So keep an eye on this. Yeah, I mean, it's frankly no surprise to me, but the media seems to be going, oh, really? Meanwhile, this is just absolutely great news, a good news alert here. The sixth largest economy in the world is hitting 100% solar periods on a daily basis. 30 out of the last 38 days, California's main grid was 100% wind, solar, or hydro. Now, not for the entire day, but for times during 30 out of the last 38 days, 100% solar, wind, and hydro. That is a BFD. Ian Magruder at Rewiring America said, and what makes it even better is that California has the largest grid-connected battery storage facility in the world. It came online in January, meaning those batteries were filling up with excess energy from the sun all afternoon and are now deploying as we speak to offset a good chunk of the methane gas generation that California still uses overnight. On April 2nd, the California Independent System Operator recommended 26 new transmission projects worth $6.1 billion, with a big number being devoted to offshore wind. In response, Jacobson predicted that California will be entirely on renewables and battery storage 24/7 by 2035. That's just 9 years from now. That's amazing. And finally, this crazy alert. Jared Moskowitz, the Democrat from Florida, has filed an amendment to legislation that would make Marjorie Taylor Greene the official envoy, Putin's special envoy to the United States Congress. Now, people thought he was joking when he went to the floor of the House and said he was going to do it, but he actually filed the legislation. And he's trying to amend it to one of these pieces of legislation that will be voted on this weekend. Probably won't pass, but hey, it says, whereas Greene has reposed information from a Russian-based disinformation and propaganda channel, it is the sense of Congress that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Georgia 14, should be appointed Vladimir Putin's special envoy to the United States Congress. Right. Brilliant. All righty. Amazing. I'll be picking up your calls on the other side of the break. What's on your mind today? How do you think this is going to work out for Donald Trump? Thoughts on what's going on between the United States, Israel, and the Middle East. I mean, it's just a lot to talk about today. We'll be right back with your calls.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with you in just a few minutes. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Recurring Crises of American Democracy, 4 Threats. I think 4 Threats is the actual title, by Susan Bettler and Robert C. Lieberman. And this is from my well-dog-eared copy. I have read this book cover to cover. It's an amazing book. This is from the introduction. When the president used his power to target immigrants, the press, and his political opponents, the sheer overreach of his actions shocked many citizens. Tensions among the nation's political leaders had been escalating for years. Embroiled in one intense conflict after another, both sides had grown increasingly distrustful of each other. Every action by one camp provoked a greater counter-reaction from the other, sometimes straining the limits of the Constitution. Fights and mob violence followed. Leaders of the dominant party grew convinced that their only hope for fixing the government was to do everything possible to weaken their opponents and silence dissent. The president signed into law provisions that made it more difficult for immigrants, who tended to support the opposition, to attain citizenship, and mandated the deportation of those who were deemed dangerous or who came from, quote, hostile, end quote, nations. He then put his pen to a law that would allow for the prosecution of those who openly criticized his administration, such as newspaper publishers. The year just described was not 2017 or 2018. Rather, it was 1798, when President John Adams signed the Alien and Sedition Act. His allies in Congress, the Federalists, argued that these measures were necessary in anticipation of a possible war with France to protect the country from internal spies, subversive elements, and dissent. The Federalists disapproved of immigrants, viewing them as a threat to the purity of our national character. They particularly disliked the Irish, the largest immigrant group, because they largely favored their political opponents, the Republicans, and sympathized with the French. Or as one Federalist congressman put it, there was no need to, quote, invite hordes of wild Irishmen, nor the turbulent and disorderly of all the world, to come here with a basic view to distract our tranquility, end quote. Critics of the new laws raised their voices in protest. The Republicans charged that they amounted to barefaced efforts to weaken their faction, which happened to include most Americans not of English heritage. Two leading Republicans, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, went so far as to advise state governments to refuse to abide by the Sedition Act, resolving that it was unconstitutional. Political conflicts boiled over into everyday life. Federalists and Republicans often resided in different neighborhoods and attended different churches. Federalists, centered particularly in New England, prized their Anglo-American identity, and even after the Revolution, they retained their affinity for their mother country. Republicans saw themselves as cosmopolitan, cherishing Enlightenment ideals of liberty and equality, and they championed the French Revolution and held disdain for Britain. By 1794, partisans in urban communities were holding separate 4th of July ceremonies. Republicans read aloud the Declaration of Independence, penned by the founder of their party, Thomas Jefferson, as evidence that independence had been their own achievement, while the Federalists offered toasts to their leader, President George Washington. The Republicans viewed themselves as the party of the people. One prominent politician among them chided the Federalists for celebrating not, quote, we the people, but, quote, we the noble, chosen, privileged few, end quote. To many people at the time, the Alien and Sedition Acts bore an unsettling resemblance to the kind of government overreach that spurred them to fight a war for independence just a few decades earlier. The acts comprised 4 laws, 3 of which placed restrictions on immigrants and appeared to be a strategic attempt to shape the electorate by excluding potential voters for the opposition in order to tip the scales of power. The 4th, the Sedition Act, made it illegal to publish, quote, any false, scandalous, and malicious writing or writings against the government of the United States or either House of Congress of the United States with intent to defame or to bring them into contempt or disrepute, end quote. By denying freedom of speech and freedom of the press, it outlawed criticism of the government and deprived citizens of the opportunity to become more fully informed by hearing alternative points of view. The measures gave the president power to exert control over Americans' lives in ways removed from congressional authority and therefore less accountable to popular control. Some state governments outright refused to abide by the new federal law, intensifying divisions. And on the streets, mock violence, the burning of effigies, was swiftly transformed into the genuine article as politically motivated beatings and open brawls proliferated. In one case, on July 27, 1798, Federalists in New York marched up Broadway singing God Save the King just to antagonize the Republicans. The latter responded by singing French Revolutionary songs. Soon the singing contest gave way to violence as fighting ensued. Watching the growing chaos and divisions, Americans of all stripes worried that their experiment in self-government might not survive the decade. They feared that monarchy would reassert itself, aristocracy would replace representative government, or some states might secede from the Union, causing its demise. The early beginnings of democracy in the United States were fragile, even at a time when some of the Constitution's framers themselves held public office. The book, 4 Threats, by Mettler and Lieberman. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out. Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. And so what's on your mind today? Russ in Hickory Hill, Illinois. Hey, Russ, what's up?
Thanks for taking my call, Tom. I know a guy said maybe Friday, but my Fridays are packed for the next 2 months. I wanted to ask your comment on this. Steve Bannon was out there on a right-wing show. That's how stupid he is. Telling them, we don't need independence. We don't need the suburban women. We don't need this because these indictments, our party is just swelling. Trump's going to romp over them. But yet, 45 is the highest I see him. Chris Hayes had him at 43%. And let's be honest, if you heard Trump this week, Tom, I can't campaign in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. What happened yesterday, Tom? He's in New York. How come he didn't fly into Pennsylvania?
He could have driven.
I don't know why.
Just an hour away.
Right, and he did nothing. But he's got to go campaign in Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. Is he starting to get some bad info on these states? But why would Bannon say that? We don't need you suburban women. We don't need your independence. These indictments are swelling our party. And all I hear is, he can't crack 45.
Yeah, I think it's hollow boasting, Russ. I think it's just hollow boasting. I think it's you know, Steve Bannon playing tough guy. You know, and you know, I mean, Bannon himself is a grifter. You know, he had that whole scam to build the wall.
What, $5-10 million for the wall?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, if Trump hadn't pardoned him on that, as I recall, you know, he'd be in jail. I mean, it's just the guy's a grifter, just like Trump. So. I wouldn't take anything he says seriously.
Look at Kennedy's family today. Did you hear that one today?
Yeah, they all but two of them came out.
Tom, 39-39.
Yeah.
They've got this guy they got to find a way to get rid of him.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't think Bobby is or Bob Kennedy is going to be much of a factor in this. Yeah. I mean, he's not.
I thought he would hurt
most
Trump
states.
more.
You know, we'll see.
He's an idiot.
A lot's going to depend on, you know, as the word comes out about, you know, who he is and what he's said and what his positions are. But
do you believe that his base, the Republican Party, will do what they say, not show up and not vote for Trump, or are they going to do what they really are, Republicans?
Yeah. No, they Republicans are Republicans. They're
Right.
motivated. They want an all-white nation, and you know, only have white people have power in this country, economic or political. You know, it's pretty straightforward, you know, what they're up to. Russ, thank you for the call. Good to hear from you. Judy in Grand Junction, Colorado. Hey, Judy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Long time.
Well, thank you.
I was also calling you about Colorado. I've been watching this on local news for several weeks now about them fighting back and forth about moving the sorting over to Denver. And Colorado is unique because we got the 250 miles of mountain between the western and eastern slopes.
You're talking here about the post office?
Yes.
Okay.
In DeJoy. And so hearing that lady call in from Georgia saying the same thing, I didn't know it was a national thing. I figured they were just going after Colorado because it's a mail-in ballot state.
Yeah. No, Louis DeJoy is committed to destroying the American post office so that people will get sufficiently pissed off that they'll beg for FedEx to take it over.
Yeah, well, he's going to slow down the mail for the most conservative part of Colorado, the western slope, which is really stupid. I hope it backfires on him.
Yeah, well,
but,
you know.
Also,
Go ahead.
On an up note in Colorado, they passed a bill that will ban some semi-automatic weapons and high-capacity magazines.
Mm-hmm. That's a good thing. That's a
positive note. Plus, scrolling across some of your screen the last few days, Louisiana Supreme Court ruled that protection against accusations of child abuse is okay because children are property.
Who ruled that?
That was scrolling across your screen yesterday all day long.
Oh, I didn't. You know, I don't see the crawl that Free Speech TV puts on our show. I have no control over that. It's not mine. It's coming from the network.
I figured you didn't. I paused it and I typed it just as it scrolled. Louisiana Supreme Court protection against accusation of child abuse.
I'm going to have to look that one up. I did. You know, Judy, thank you. Thanks for the tip on that, and appreciate the call. Mark in Portland. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Hi, so you were talking earlier about Marjorie Taylor Greene and Russian talking points. Wouldn't that raise a red flag with Christopher Wray that, maybe I should get a Pfizer warrant on Marjorie Taylor Greene and tap her phone or tap her email and see what's going on between communications between the Kremlin or Russian, intelligence and her.
I don't think she's getting this, straight from Moscow, in a way that she realizes is straight from Moscow. I think she's getting it off social media. The Russian troll farms, I mean, they've got hundreds of thousands of people in Russia who are, this is a multi-million-dollar, this is a billion-dollar operation. Hundreds of thousands of people in Russia whose job is to pretend that they're Americans and post on Facebook and Twitter, and they're doing it. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is buying it. I guess I'm betting that she thinks she's actually listening to Americans. And now, of course, in many cases she is, because a lot of Americans are parroting this Russian propaganda.
Well, I know that there were Pfizer warrants on what's his name before the election of 2016, and they were watching him. And but I'm wondering, on Trump, and there was another person that was actually gaining information for Russia through other channels, but I can't remember.
I mean, it started with Carter Page. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. That was where Operation Crossfire Hurricane all started. Was when he told the Australian ambassador that he knew that Russia had been giving Donald Trump information about Hillary's emails, and and that was just a couple days before the story broke, and that guy went right to the FBI and said something's going on here, and that's opened the investigation. And then Robert Mueller, of course, said that there were 10 different times that Donald Trump lied to the FBI to try to obscure his contacts with Russia that could be indicted. But Bill Barr just blew it all up, as you well know, Mark.
Well, do you think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is just a dupe of Russian bots and intelligence, or do you think she actually is knowingly working to advance a Russian agenda?
I think Trump is knowingly working to advance a Russian agenda because he's gotten billions of dollars from Russian oligarchs over the years that has kept him afloat since he was bankrupt in the 90s, and he got overt help from Putin to win the election, and whether Putin's bribing him or blackmailing him or whatever, he's completely and openly pro-Putin, anti-America. With Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'm guessing it's more that she's just not that bright, and she's
I think that's true.
And she's buying what she's reading on what do you
social
call it?
Media.
In the media. Thanks a lot, Mark, for the call. Good to hear from you. Good talking to you. Thank you. Diana in Carson City, Nevada. Hey, Diana, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm just following up on the two calls now about Louis DeJoy's moving the processing centers, out of their original areas. Mm-hmm. And the same thing in Reno, Nevada.
Really? He's doing it in every state, huh?
Yeah, and the interesting thing was when I heard that caller from Colorado, they're moving it from Reno to Sacramento, which also involves going over the Sierra Mountains. And in the wintertime, that pass is closed. I think she said it was closed 34 days out of the season. So that's going to slow down the mail coming back into Reno to do that.
So to mail a letter from Las Vegas to Reno, it's going to have to go through Sacramento?
It won't go through Reno because it won't be there anymore, is my understanding. There won't be a processing center in Reno. So I'm not sure of the specifics in terms of, what's going to go where, but there won't be a processing center in Reno the way there is now. And our Senator, Jackie Rosen, she was, the reason I knew about it was because she grilled DeJoy on this, and we did get a clip on the news about it, and you can search Jackie Rosen, Louis DeJoy hearing, and hear her grilling him, or watch her grilling him. And it just seems like he doesn't care.
No. He really doesn't. He's an extraordinarily arrogant man.
Yeah, and what you said is true. They're creating a problem so that people will hate the government more and move to privatize. And it's really really sad.
Yeah. No, this is the same strategy that, George W. Bush and Donald Trump, both cutting the staff of Social Security and Medicare, so that when people turn 65 and try to hook up with Social Security and Medicare, they get angry and frustrated. Again, they'll call for it to be privatized. This is an old Republican trick. Diana, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be in a couple of seconds. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. Russ in White Plains, New York. Hey, Russ, what's up?
Oh, hi, Tom. I listen to Bannon, too, like that other Russ, and he talks about the threat of debt expansion all the time. He sounds like Karl Marx. But what I want to ask you about is, Scott Ritter, the UN weapons inspector that warned us about the fake news WMDs in Iraq? Scott Ritter.
And then got busted for sex with underage girls and then started quoting Putin propaganda all the time. Yeah, I remember him.
Right. Well, if he was in France, nobody cared. But, in the U.S., everyone's obsessed with sex and, well, I won't say polyandry. But, Scott Ritter's been making recent remarks about this Iran's hypersonic missile attack in response to Israel's F-35 attack in Syria and the Iranian embassy. Have you heard about that on April 14th when,
I did not know that Iran was using hypersonic missiles against Israel. I thought that they were mostly drones, and there were a couple of, kind of the equivalent of a cruise missile.
Right. Well, he has access. He knows specialized magazines, and I believe the same thing. 99% of the things were shot down. But he explained that they blew up decoys. That's what they were blowing up, decoys that fire was displayed. And the hypersonic missiles got through. They destroyed an airbase in Israel, and they destroyed what he called the deterrent supremacy that Israel used to be believed to have. Once the missiles landed in Israel, these 4 million Israelis with dual citizenship, they see the vulnerability and they're heading for the exits. They're not going to die for Israel. So, he also...
Sounds like a wacky conspiracy theory to me. I mean, are you saying that Israel is hiding the fact that they were hit by missiles?
Do you think they'd be honest with us, that they would tell us about their vulnerability?
I think if they were hit by a missile, they would want the world to know, because that would increase Netanyahu's rationalization, that would give legitimacy to his rationalization for a retaliatory strike against Iran, which he wants to do. He wants to expand this war to keep himself out of jail.
Yeah, but if he's been told by Biden, no, you don't do this. You don't make them destroy the Gulf of Hormuz and cause gasoline prices to go to $10 a gallon. He's been told, don't start World War III. Right. And Biden's made it perfectly clear. They got to put a leash on.
And this morning he said, I don't care what Biden says. I'm going to do whatever I want.
I know. Well, that's what Scott Ritter said, that he's a wild card. Netanyahu's survival, he's 76 years old. He's a sick guy. He doesn't want to die in prison, and he'll put his own survival above the defense of Israel and the defense of the rest of the world.
I agree.
But,
I agree with that analysis.
Can I say one thing? Can I ask you one thing about Marjorie Taylor Greene? She said it was repulsive to justify arms to Ukraine for jobs in the U.S. Do you think it's okay to justify weapons to Ukraine because it creates jobs in the U.S.? You think that's okay, Tom? Thanks.
I don't think that's a reasonable argument, frankly. I mean, it's a rebuttal to people who say, oh, we're sending all our money over to Ukraine. No, we're not, actually. We're sending weapons to Ukraine, and those weapons are paid for with U.S. tax dollars, and they do create jobs here in the United States. So, for people who say, oh, it's just, it's a drain on our economy to support Ukraine, no, it's not. It's actually a stimulus to our economy. But that's no reason to do it. The reason to do it is because Ukraine is a democracy that aspires to become part of the European Union and part of NATO. They're the good guys. They're on our side. They reflect our values. And Russia is a totalitarian autocracy that is committed to expansionism, and Putin is a murderous dictator and a thug. So that's why we should be supporting Ukraine. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, 49 minutes past the hour. Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio, and tag you're it. So MAGA Mike and the Republicans want a religious test for people running for public office. They want to know that you are sufficiently Christian to be worthy of being elected. Right. MAGA Mike is one of these 7 mountain evangelicals. There are 7 domains where these dominionists believe that we need to have religion completely take them over. Education, religion, family, business, government, military, arts and entertainment, and the media. Seriously. This is not what Jesus was preaching when he said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God what is God's. This is the opposite, in fact, of what Jesus was teaching. It's the opposite of Matthew 25, where Jesus said the only way to get to heaven is by feeding the hungry, healing the sick, helping the poor. This is counter-Christian, anti-Christian, in fact. In fact, I think you could say it is the Antichrist's work. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. 9 minutes before the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Ed in Erie, Michigan. Hey, Ed, what's up?
Hey, Tom, a little shout out to Free Speech TV for running this on their scroll the other day when Congressman Program was on. But, you know, there's a vote going on. The UAW plant, I believe in Tennessee, started Wednesday and it's going through Friday to unionize finally a plant down there. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yes, it's going on as we speak.
That's great.
Volkswagen plant. I believe it's the one in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And it was on the scroll. And then I read that morning that governors from 5, you know, the usual suspects, Texas, North Carolina, Mississippi, whatever, were debuting the UAW for trying to organize down there and telling the employees that they were, you know, you're putting your jobs in jeopardy. And it was on the scroll, Free Speech TV, and the only place it was that was brought up, governors from, that was on your scroll. You probably didn't even see that. Or
yeah, no,
whatever.
I don't. I can't see the scroll.
But that when Congressman Program was on, I was trying to call him. That's what needs to be stopped. These governors, politicians, before it was Corker down there when they tried to, you know, they put his face in it, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. That's why right there is what. And like Free Speech TV, and I forgot where I read it in the morning. I read it on my phone in the morning somewhere. I don't remember. And then by golly, here it was on Free Speech TV. And thank Free Speech TV for running that and where, because I haven't seen it anywhere else.
Yeah.
Okay, what these governors are doing, you know, threatening the employee, you're jeopardizing your jobs. You know,
yeah, they're all trying to play Ronald Reagan. I totally get it, Ed. Ed, thank you for the call. Spot on. David in North Miami Beach, Florida. Hey, David, what's up?
Hey, y'all. Once upon a time, Dale Franken show was here at the Miami Book Fair 2005, and the now late Bob Graham called into the show. So his loss is just, you know, horrendous. But at least we have his book, Intelligence Matters. So the good news is Black Hole Sun was back on the Billboard chart. I'm going to take credit, you and me, for mentioning it during the eclipse.
Okay.
It's bad that maybe the only way we defeat Trump is by only tracking his actions. We stop caring about what he says unless it's under oath.
Mm-hmm. Well, even when it's under oath. You know, he has lied under oath on multiple occasions, apparently.
Granted, but at least it's easier to track instead of, you know, let me whip out my book with his 30,000 lies.
30,000,
pretty like the movie Labyrinth. You know, we declare you have no power over me. The ugly is our real threat is about a million wannabe Trumps, people like Leslie Gold, the pawnbroker, who takes credit for everything he's accomplished, and at least he's worked at it, but he ignores the path that built him up to where he is and undermines his employees and his own kids by, you know, ignoring basic strategy, just, you know, really ordinary logic that any normal businessman would do. But Trump never knew because he's so busy, believing his own press.
Yeah.
So we have to watch out for those million wannabe Trumps, half of which are either senile or at least should retire but can't or won't.
Yeah.
From bad mental health, PTSD, or just wishing they had accomplished as much as his.
I'm concerned about the Republican fascist, the fascist politicians who have been drawn to the Republican Party because of Trump, and particularly some of the younger ones, and and also that Mitch McConnell and the Federalist Society have made sure they are on the federal bench. But we've got a lot of state politicians, particularly in red states, but even in blue states, where you've got red areas, reliably red areas, and you get these Trump-like, wannabe fascists, and some of them are going to be very good at what they do.
There's nothing else to do.
Yeah, and I think they represent a real threat to America. I agree with you, David. David,
are.
thank you for the call. Good talking to you. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's up? You saw the movie Civil War?
Hi.
Is that what I see here?
Yes, Tom, I want a review on it. Is it worth going?
I thought it was worth going to. It wasn't profound. It wasn't like The Plot Against America, the HBO movie, which is just profound. No. This wasn't anything like that. It was just good, dumb fun for 2 hours, and it makes you think, about. The Civil War is not a good thing. It's not a fun thing. I mean, that was the principal message of the movie, I suppose.
Did they portray it with consequences? I mean, or was it a thoughtful movie, or was it just
they never explained why the United States was in a civil war. They never explained who the sides were and what they were all about. You could argue that. Go ahead.
They were trying to be ambiguous. They said.
That's right. They were trying not to be political. They were trying to avoid being political. And they accomplished that, and that, from my point of view, weakened the movie considerably. But like I said, it's I wouldn't avoid it. The violence is acceptable. It's not it's not the kind of violence that makes you want to run out of the theater or puke. It's
no, but it's realistic, and did it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it kind of showed where we could be going if we keep this up.
It did. I recommend going to see it. I thought it was a good movie. Diane, I got to run, but thank you for the call. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls. Well, actually, we'll be back with Phil Ittner live from Ukraine in just about 6 minutes, so stay with
us. You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1 hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3 hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Hi, for our book club today, we're reading from Bernie Sanders' new book, Where We Go From Here, 2 Years in the Resistance. This is from the introduction. During my campaign for president in 2016, I stated over and over again that the future of our country was dependent upon our willingness to make a political revolution. I stressed that real change never occurs from the top down. It always happens from the bottom up. No real change in American history, not the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the gay rights movement, the environmental movement, or any other movement for social justice has ever succeeded without grassroots activism, without millions of people engaged in the struggle for justice. That's what I said when I ran for president. That's what I believe now. That's what I've been working to accomplish over the last several years. At a time of massive and growing income and wealth inequality, as our nation moves closer and closer to an oligarchic form of society, we need an unprecedented grassroots political movement to stand up to the greed of the billionaire class and the politicians they own. And the good news is we're making progress. People in every region of our country are standing up and fighting back against the most dishonest and reactionary president in the history of the republic. In state after state, they're also taking on establishment politicians who are more concerned about protecting their wealthy campaign contributors than they are with the needs of the middle class and the working people they're supposed to represent. We're making progress when millions of people in every state in the country take to the streets for the Women's March in opposition to Trump's reactionary agenda. We're making progress when an unprecedented grassroots movement elects a young African American as mayor of Birmingham, Alabama. We're making progress when tens of thousands of Americans turn out at rallies and town hall meetings to successfully oppose the Republican effort to throw 32 million people off health insurance. We're making progress when governors and local officials announce in response to student demands tuition-free public colleges and universities. We're making progress when over the past 2 years, hundreds of first-time candidates of every conceivable background run for school board, city council, state legislature, and Congress, and many of them win. The good news is that the American people are far more united than the media would like us to believe. They get it. They know that over the past 40 years, despite a huge increase in worker productivity, the middle class has continued to shrink while the very rich have become very much richer. They know that for the first time in the modern history of the United States, our kids will likely have a lower living standard than us. The bad news is that instead of going forward together, demagogues like Trump win elections by dividing us. The bad news is that too many of us are getting angry at the wrong people. I was not an immigrant picking strawberries it was not an immigrant picking strawberries at $8 an hour who destroyed the economy in 2008. It was the greed and illegal behavior of Wall Street. It was not transgender people who threw millions of workers out on the street as factories were shut down all across the country. It was profitable multinational corporations in search of cheap labor abroad. Our job, for the sake of our kids and grandchildren, is to bring our people together around a progressive agenda. Are the majority of people in our country deeply concerned about the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality that we are experiencing? You bet they are. Do they believe that our campaign finance system is corrupt and enables the rich to buy elections? Overwhelmingly they do. Do they want to raise the minimum wage to a living wage and provide pay equity for women? Yes, they do. Do they think that the very rich and large corporations should pay more in taxes so that all of our kids can have free tuition at public universities and colleges? Yep. Do they believe that the United States should join every other major country and guarantee health care as a right? Yes, again. Do they believe climate change is real? You got to be kidding. Are they tired of the United States of America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, falling apart at the seams with roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, airports, rails, levees, and dams either failing or at risk of failing? Who isn't? Further, a majority of the American people want comprehensive immigration reform and a criminal justice system that is based on justice, not racism or mass incarceration. Today, what the American people want is not what they're getting. In fact, under Republican leadership in the House, Senate, and White House, they are getting exactly the opposite of what they want. The American people want a government that represents all of us. Instead, they're getting a government that represents the interests and extremist ideology of wealthy campaign contributors. They want environmental policies that combat climate change and pollution and that will allow our kids to live on a healthy and habitable planet. Instead, they're getting executive orders and legislation that push more fossil fuel production, more greenhouse gas emissions, and more pollution. They want a foreign policy that prioritizes peacemaking. Instead, they're getting increased military spending and growing hostility to our long-term democratic allies. They want a nation in which all people are treated with dignity and respect and where we continue our decades-long struggle to end discrimination based on race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, and nation of origin. Instead, they have a president who seeks to win political support by appealing to those very deep-seated prejudices. During the last several years, I've worked hard in Washington, but I've also traveled to 32 states in every region of our country. I've seen the beauty, strength, and courage of our people. I've also seen fear and despair. I've talked to people with life-threatening illnesses in West Virginia who worry about what will happen to them or their loved ones if they lose the health insurance that keeps them alive. I've talked to young immigrants, dreamers in Arizona who are frightened to death about losing their legal status and being deported from the only country they have ever known. I talked to a young single mom in Nevada worried about how she can raise her daughter on $10.45 an hour. I talked to retirees and older workers in Kansas who are outraged that as a result of congressional legislation, they could lose up to 60% of the pensions they paid into and were promised as deferred compensation for a lifetime of hard work. Bernie Sanders, where we go from here.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. On the line with us, Phil Ittner, the veteran war correspondent based out of Kyiv, Ukraine. You can find his video blog over on YouTube by just plugging in his name, Philip Ittner, Philipittner. His Twitter handle is Ittner Philip, just the last name, first name. Phil, welcome back to the program. How's everything going in Ukraine right now?
Currently not so great. We're suffering here from a major lack of, in particular, ammunition. And the Ukrainian armed forces are really fighting with one arm tied behind their back and on their back foot. So there's deep concern over what's happening on the front line, and this has been going on for quite some time. Obviously, what happened yesterday on the Hill with the announcement from Speaker Johnson that this aid package bill could be put to a vote as soon as Saturday is giving people cause for some optimism, but they've been burnt so many times, not least of which by Johnson himself, that until the vote actually happens, there's a lot of kind of bated breath.
Right, and we also don't know to what extent he's going to put poison pills in that legislation, things like, oh, it's a loan, it's not a gift, or it's, whatever, this conditional, we just don't know, so yeah, I get it. I saw a headline yesterday, Russia is bombing Ukraine into darkness. How bad is that?
Bad. Right now, thankfully, because we're not in winter, the strain is not going to be as heavy on the power grid. But, last week, I believe it was last Wednesday, we got hit. There's a major power station just south of the city. It's one of the largest power production centers in not just the city itself, but the entire, what they call an oblast here, an area.
State.
Yeah, a state, a district, what have you. It is gone. It is lost. It is unlikely to be repaired. It will have to be fully replaced. And that happened, per the president's office here, that happened because we don't have air defenses. And, this is there's three primary weapon systems that the Ukrainians are desperately in need of, according to them. And that is longer range missile systems, the ATACMS missile system, which they're hoping to be included in this package, and, better air power, in terms of like the F-16, which, fingers crossed, should be coming online sometime shortly, not too long in the future. And then in particular, and perhaps most importantly, air defense. I mean, they watched what was happening in Israel and Gaza and the attack, the massive attack, 300 plus missiles and drones shot at Israel, but not a lot of damage because they have the Iron Dome. It's the same system in essence as what they have here. They just don't have the ammunition for it. So they watched what happened in Israel and said, but our cities every day are being attacked. We can't defend ourselves. So they're desperate to get more ammunition, in particular for the Patriot system, which will help them protect their cities, their civilians, and of course also their armed forces.
Yeah. Excuse me. What's the status of aid from Europe?
They're stepping it up significantly in recent months. Now, this is a bit of a double-edged sword in some ways for American interest, because Europe, looking at what is happening in the dysfunction on the Hill, there's growing concern that America is no longer a reliable ally, and that they're going to have to this transatlantic relationship, which has established peace for decades, is now being called into question. The Europeans say that they are stepping things up. Their efforts, like in the Czech Republic, is gone outside of the European Union, outside of NATO, to procure artillery shells. There are more F-16s being promised by a number of people, including the Dutch. France even is saying the potential is there for actual soldiers to be sent here, which has a lot of people concerned. But the Europeans, while they are stepping things up, they're having to do so because America has been caught in its own, myopic, domestic confrontation, and it's the friction and the factionalization that's happening in the United States. And they're looking at it and they're going, we've always considered America to kind of be the stone, the cornerstone upon which our military alliance is built. We're not sure if we can trust that anymore because of the dysfunction. So while it's good for Ukraine that they're going to be getting aid from the Europeans, we do see some fracturing of that NATO and transatlantic alliance, which is cause for concern for many sectors.
I understand that Germany has been backing away from Ukraine aid. What's going on with that?
Germany has had a history in this conflict of running hot and cold. There was a diplomatic mission to China, which came under criticism because there's this discussion of forcing Ukraine to the table. And there's always been a dragging of the feet when it comes to sophisticated weapon systems, particularly offensive weaponry. Now, in this period of time in which the air defenses have been lacking coming from America, we did see in the immediate aftermath of that power plant bombing that happened last week that the Germans said, we will provide an extra Patriot missile battery. So, Germany is a bit elusive when it comes to this conflict, because they do sometimes, go forward and put missile systems at the disposal of the Ukrainians, but then they'll run really cold when it comes to, say, the Leopard tanks. They had to have their arms twisted. They would only do it after the United States promised Abrams. So Germany is, while not as dysfunctional as the United States, they kind of run hot and cold. And so there's a lot of concern here by Ukrainians that, again, this is another Western ally that isn't looking, from a Ukrainian perspective, isn't looking at the conflict here as Ukraine being the battlefield, the battleground for a battle that affects the entire West, because an aggressive Russia is purposefully, and we know this from recent reports. There's the New York Times report that came out just recently, where documents were released that, or were discovered or obtained, in which the Russians openly said it is our objective to destabilize the West. It is our aim. It is our goal. And so Ukrainians are looking at this and looking at allies who, notably America, but also, Germany has come under criticism here. as this is the fight. We're willing to fight this fight. We're willing to put soldiers on the line here. We're only asking for weaponry. And so they're watching very closely what's going to be happening on the floor of the House, hopefully imminently.
Yeah, on Saturday. 2 or 3 weeks ago, we reported, and you and I discussed, as I recall, I certainly reported on this program, that several countries had announced that they were going to be sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. I believe Greece was one. I think maybe the Czech Republic was another. I frankly don't recall.
The Dutch.
The Dutch, yeah.
The Dutch.
What's the status of those jets? I mean, it seems like those are the kind of things that could change the course of the war.
You're right there. There's a lot of far more knowledgeable military experts than I have said that the F-16 as an air asset, as a platform in the sky that can both attack ground units, but also engage in air-to-air combat, that this could be as significant a game changer as, say, the HIMARS missile system, which the Americans gave to Ukrainians, which has allowed them to get a longer range artillery effect. That's the HIMARS, the ATACMS, these kind of things. These were huge game changers. The Bradley, for example, the Bradley fighting vehicle has been a really big asset for the Ukrainians, and they're hoping that the F-16 will also do something. Now, there's been trepidation about the F-16 because Moscow has warned that because the F-16 has the capacity to carry nuclear weapons, the nuclear tipped warheads, that this would be putting nukes on their border, and they've saber rattled about that being a red line. But again, they've done this before, and those F-16s are coming. The pilots are trained. We do expect them imminently. They will be here probably within. I would hate to put a time frame on it and be wrong, but I think it's a safe bet, 6 weeks to 2 months sort of period, because this is something that's been going on for quite some time. Yeah. They're physically looking at more F-16s, but it's really the trained pilots and the infrastructure that is most critical, and that, we are told here, is almost ready and good to go.
I got it. Phil Ittner, check out his video blog over on YouTube. Phil, thanks so much for dropping by.
Thank you, Tom.
Always great talking with you. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
The Republicans in Arizona up to, I'll tell you about that right after the break. Stay with us. And welcome back. Don in Tacoma, Washington, listening to 91.3 FM. Hey, Don, what's up?
No, John.
Oh, is it John?
John. Hello. Yeah.
My apologies.
Thank
I'll
you.
fix that.
Yeah. How are you doing? It's good to call. And I haven't called in like 14 years. So
okay.
But
so what's up?
I'm gaining this extra concern about related to the conflict in the Middle East and seeing everything that's been going on regarding the incessant bombing of Gaza, thousands and thousands of Palestinians dying, obviously, and really complete lack of any compassion from Israel about using as many bombs as possible. But what is putting me in a big question is it's basically Israel said they're going to retaliate for the consulate bombing.
Right. They're going to retaliate for the retaliation.
I guess what I'm getting to is if they don't care, they really don't care. Really, it comes down to what would stop them from using the most powerful bombs they have. I mean, really, it's like it's something that we can't imagine would happen. But I almost think like it's a scary scenario
against Gaza. You mean?
Huh?
Or against Iran?
Against Iran.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Israel has nuclear weapons. I mean, they've got small ones and big ones.
What we've been seeing,
yeah,
with the attack on the Palestinians, they don't care. They don't care.
Well.
So, what would stop them? Why would they care about life in Iran? Why would they care?
Well, I think the thing that they're worried about is an overwhelming response, particularly if Russia got engaged in the game. But say that again.
They're not worried about. This is one more thing. I don't want to keep you forever here, but looking at knowing a little bit based off historical fact that what controls the government in Israel is basically a Zionist cult, because they are ideologically that's based off their religion, and it's like an Armageddon cult.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah. The Mashiach now. No,
I
get
weapons.
It. But my point is that they're not suicidal, John. The Israelis are not suicidal. Netanyahu might have ignored the warnings that the Hamas attack was coming.
Yeah.
He might have thought there was some benefit in ignoring those warnings. He might have thought that an attack would be to his benefit, just like George Bush might have thought that. I'm not asserting that they did. But there are, people in the United States and Israel who are making those assertions, and it's in some cases kind of hard to knock them down. But I think that they've been fairly calibrated. Their attack on the embassy, they knew that it would draw a response, but it wasn't, an attack directly on Iran itself, although it's sovereign Iranian territory. And Iran responded in a fairly calibrated fashion too. So that's the thing. I don't think that either one of them want this to get completely out of control. The danger is, though, that it does, that exactly that might happen. John, thank you for the call. It's 21 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day in just a moment. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Back in 2010, when Viktor Orban took over the Fidesz party in Hungary, that party was sort of like the Republican Party. It was just a conventional conservative European political party. And he has turned it into a neo-fascist powerhouse. He pushed through he altered the nation's constitution to push through what we would call gerrymandering and voter suppression so that his party will always win. He campaigned on building a wall. Build a wall was literally one of his campaign slogans, and he did build a wall across the southern border of Hungary to keep out Syrian refugees who were fleeing the violence when Russia was bombing that country. His other two campaign slogans were, and I quote, "Restore Christian purity and make Hungary great again." Seriously, back in 2010, 6 years before Trump. There's an amazing backstory about how Viktor Orban is being cloned, essentially, in the GOP. You can find the article over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. 23 minutes past the hour. In Arizona, when the Arizona Supreme Court ruled that 1864 total ban on abortions was now the law of the land, because, frankly, the legislation that the Republicans had passed during the time that Doug Ducey, was the Republican governor, and the Republicans actually had a majority in both the House and Senate in Arizona, they passed this 15-week ban, but it had a stipulation in it. This was before the Dobbs decision. It had a stipulation in it that if the Dobbs decision comes down, the 15-week ban is out the window, and the original 1864 ban becomes law. And sure enough, that's what happened. And the state Supreme Court said that's what has to happen. It's what the law says. So here we are. Republicans immediately came out. Carrie Lake, for example, who a year or so ago had said, well, if the Supreme Court overrules Roe v. Wade, that'll be a great thing for Arizona because we got this total ban from 1864, and it'll save a lot of children's lives, her phrase. She's now singing a different tune. A lot of Republicans, for public consumption, are singing a different tune. But every time the Democrats, this happened again yesterday, on Wednesday, every time the Democrats come forward with a piece of legislation to unroll this, to roll back or do away with this 1864 ban and just go back to the 15-week ban or no ban, the Republicans vote it down. They blocked it yesterday in both the House and the Senate in Arizona. The Arizona citizens have to be watching this going, it's going to be a real interesting November in Arizona. Meanwhile, this fellow goes to Europe. His name is Rene Redmond, and his wife, or Raimund, and his wife, they spent a good chunk of last September in Switzerland. And they had gone to the T-Mobile store, their cell phone provider, before they left, or apparently they went to the T-Mobile store in Switzerland and said, actually, I'm not sure if it was in Switzerland or, it's just before leaving, so it would have been here in the United States, and said, do I have the right plan here so when I go to Switzerland, I don't get whacked with roaming charges? And the people at the store said, yes, you're good. Turns out they weren't good, and they got home, and there was a phone bill for $143,000. This was because of roaming data. Your phone is constantly sucking down data. It sucks down gigabytes of data every month, depending on how many apps you have and what they use and how you use it. And, they did not have a plan that included a European provision, which is weird with T-Mobile, because T-Mobile is owned by Germany. A good chunk of the company's stock, I think the majority, is owned by Deutsche Telekom. But in any case, he called T-Mobile and said, $143,000, really? You want me to pay that? And they said, yep, you got to pay it. So he hired a lawyer, and the lawyer reached out to ABC News. ABC News reached out to T-Mobile, and T-Mobile decided at that moment that maybe we should just let this guy off the hook. So Renee is not going to have to pay the $143,000. But the lesson for all the rest of us is if you're going to travel outside the country, and I realize most people don't, but if you're going to be traveling outside the country, make sure your phone plan is up to date, right, and is designed to deal with that. Otherwise, you're going to have a real unpleasant surprise when you get home. It's 27 minutes past the hour. I'll pick up your calls on the other side of this break. What's on your mind today? It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option. I'll be right back with your calls.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Speaking the truth, Donald Trump would really rather you didn't know. I'll be right back with your calls. Our book in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Cabinet, George Washington and the Creation of an American Institution by Leslie M. Chervinsky. This is from the introduction. At 11:30 in the morning on August 22nd, 1789, a large cream-colored coach pulled up to the front door of Federal Hall, 6 Wall Street in New York City. 6 matching, perfectly groomed horses pulled the elegant carriage with sparkling gold trim. The coachman, outfitted in crisp white and red trimmed livery, jumped down from the back of the carriage and opened the door. An elegantly dressed man with powdered hair stepped down with a portfolio of papers under his arm. He towered over his companion, Henry Knox, the acting Secretary of War, and his slaves attending to the horses. His ornate coach and his imposing presence drew curious stares from strangers passing by on the street. He walked up to the front door of Federal Hall and was immediately announced. George Washington, the first president of the United States, had arrived for his first visit to the United States Senate. This was no ordinary meeting. 2 years earlier, the delegates at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia had agreed that the Senate would advise and consent on treaties and other questions of foreign policy. But in practice, how the president and the Senate would interact remained for the first office holders to work out. Washington's relationship with the Senate was just one of countless governing details that he had to establish as the first president. Establishing precedent for every presidential action consumed his thoughts. in the first few years of his administration. Not only would the American public and international audience judge his every action, but his successors would be guided by his choices. The stakes could not have been higher. The future of the Republic rested on Washington making the right decisions. He approached every new situation with caution and took action only after consulting with his advisors. His first visit to the Senate was no different. The tense relationship between Native American nations and the United States posed an immediate challenge after Washington's inauguration on April 30th, 1789. Most Native American nations had sided with the British during the Revolutionary War, recognizing the threat that American settlers posed to native lands. On November 15th, 1789, representatives from the national government, North and South Carolina, the Creeks, and the Cherokees planned to meet to discuss the controversial treaties signed between 1783 and 1789 and to negotiate a new treaty. Washington had to select the representatives to send on behalf of the federal government, another important first for the new president. At his August 22nd meeting, Washington planned to seek advice about what instructions he should give to the commissioners. Because he considered Native American relations to fall under the heading of foreign policy, he followed the constitutional guidelines calling for him with the Senate. On May 25th, 1789, less than a month after his inauguration, Washington sent to the Senate all of the United States' previous treaties with Indian nations, along with a number of supporting documents. After a brief discussion, the Senate postponed its consideration of these papers. At the beginning of August, the Senate created a committee to meet with Washington. That committee planned the minute details of the upcoming meeting, down to where Washington would sit and how he would enter the chamber. On August 20 and 21, Washington nominated commissioners to negotiate with the Southern Indians. On August 21st, he sent an official note to the Senate announcing his visit the next day to discuss the terms of the proposed treaty. When Washington and Knox arrived at Federal Hall at 11:30 a.m., the doorkeeper announced their arrival. Washington sat at the front of the chamber, and Knox took the chair to the right. Washington handed his remarks to Knox, who in turn handed them to Vice President John Adams. Adams read the statement, but as Senator William McClay from Pennsylvania recalled, the senator, quote, could not master one sentence of it, end quote. Adams was not known for his public speaking skills, but the senator's struggles weren't entirely his fault. The Senate gathered for their work in the large chamber that occupied the first floor of Federal Hall. Because of the August heat in New York City, the doorkeeper had opened the windows in search of a cooling breeze. But along with fresh air, noise, Wall Street's pedestrians, carriages, peddlers, and horses flowed into the Senate chamber. The clamor overpowered Adams' voice, so few senators could make out the words that Washington had so carefully crafted. After a few complaints, Adams repeated the speech from the beginning. Washington's remarks offered a brief synopsis of the current diplomatic state between the United States and the Southern Indians and posed 7 questions for the Senate to answer with an aye or a no. Adams finished his recitation and sat. The seconds ticked by as the senators remained in awkward silence. A few shuffled papers or cleared their throats. McClay speculated in his diary that his colleagues were so intimidated by Washington's presence in the Senate chamber that they cowered in shameful silence. Eager to show that they could be active participants in the creation of foreign policy, McClay stood up and suggested referring the Washington's 7 questions to committee for discussion in detail. Washington then lost his temper, stood out at, "This defeats every purpose of my coming here." The senators fell into a stunned hush before Washington acquiesced to McClay's suggestion and offered to return to the Senate a few days later. Although he did not return to the following Monday, his first visit to the Senate was an inauspicious the executive legislative relationship. The book is The Cabinet by Leslie M. Chervinsky. Hey, if you like the rants that I open the show with every day, they're typically published over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Are you feeling exhausted by Donald Trump? So many Americans are. And not Donald Trump, not just Donald Trump. The entire GOP. We've got this war on trans people. We've got a war on queer people. We've got a war on people of color, a war on voting, Young people concerned about climate change, and Republicans not only refusing to do anything about it, but like Marjorie Taylor Greene out there talking about how, oh, well, it's just normal variation, you know, it's nothing to worry about, just keep on shoveling that coal. People cutting pills in half because they can't afford their medicine. Parents who don't have enough money to properly dress their kids for school, even though they're working full-time. Seniors fearing that the Republican Party is going to finally succeed in killing off Social Security and Medicare. They're trying it again. You know, it's this whole, yes, we'll raise the debt ceiling as part of cut Social Security. It's nuts. I got a whole op-ed about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Welcome back. 35 minutes past the hour. And picking up your calls here. What's on your mind today? Elaine in Quebec, Canada. Hey, Elaine, what's up? Elaine? A-L-A-I-N? Am I saying it right? I'm not hearing you if your phone is muted. Going once? Well, Elaine is calling from Quebec. Mark, Elaine's on hold on line 3. Jeff in San Francisco. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Probably just reiterate what another call said, but the victories of the UAW are really huge for the unions. And read an article about how they're really trying to block it in 6 states in former Confederate places, you know, Texas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. They want us all working on Maggie's farm.
Oh, yeah.
But,
that's the essence of right to work for less. These are all right to work for less states, you know.
But I think people are starting to kind of wake up to the fact that, you know, they need unions. So that's our only shot in this country. I think it's for, you know, to bring back unions, and they're coming back pretty strong, I think. So there's a lot of hope there that we just really got to keep pushing. That's the way to. How much do you think that'd be the way to get us for a single payer with unions pushing for that? Because then it'll raise wages pretty much, don't you believe?
I would think so. I mean, the argument for single payer is simple. It'll cost America half as much for health care, and we'll get better care, and everybody will be covered. So, you know, it's just that you're going to have a whole bunch of, you know, billionaire executives who aren't going to be making millions of dollars a week any longer. So, Jeff, thank you for the call. Spot on. You know, good talking to you. Sandra in Omaha, Nebraska. Hey, Sandra, what's up?
Well, we got our Nebraska primary ballots last week, and I looked at the ballot and set it aside because there was some people I wanted to kind of investigate, which is why I like the mail ballot. Mm-hmm. And then we got an email yesterday saying, oh, there's a problem with the ballots. You'll have to return those. And so I called this morning, and they said, well, the problem is that the ballot envelope that you would return it in has a different identification number than the ballot itself. Mm. And the ballot itself is identified by Democratic ballot and then a number. Mm-hmm. My first question is, why should it matter what party it is? The ballot does not have any person's name on it. It's supposed to be secret. Mm. So if a ballot comes in, the machine can read it. It can read the vote names on it one way or the other. And the same is true with the main election in November. Right. Why should it matter?
What you're missing
with this, the ballot envelope, the number did not match.
Right. What you're missing is that your secret ballot is only secret in as far as the government does not record who you voted for. But what it does record is that you voted. And that's the number that's on your ballot and that's on your envelope, so that when the envelope comes in, they can say, oh, that's Sandra's ballot. And then when the ballot is run through the machine, it agrees and said, yes, this is Sandra's ballot. So that's, I mean, I don't know what's going on in Nebraska, but that sounds like what's going on. Like, you know, they screwed up and they didn't put...
They told me the ballots would have been thrown away because they did not match the number on the envelope that it was returned in.
Exactly.
So
it'd be like Sandra's ballot in John's envelope, and they don't want that.
Right. It identifies a district that I'm supposedly in. Mm-hmm. And so if that doesn't match, then there's a question, and it gets
Well, it goes beyond that. There will be something that identifies you.
Yeah. So my suggestion to voters nationwide is if you get your ballot by mail, do identify that envelope that you're putting it back into and your ballot, and scrutinize any identification numbers to make sure they match, because the person that I talked to said, "Oh, I've never seen this happen, and I've been here 15 years." And I thought, "Oh, I'm sure I agree with you. I bet you haven't." But this is a very unusual year, isn't it?
Yeah. Was this for the primary election, Sandra?
This is for the primary.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the primaries in May. So I'll have to drive over there. That's a 13-mile drive to get to the office where I can get a correct ballot.
Did the Republican ballots get screwed up this way, too?
I doubt it. They didn't say.
Yeah, it would be a good question to ask. Has your local newspaper covered the story?
No.
You might want to
I'm
reach
sure
out
it
to
will
them and flag it for them.
Never get to them, but we do have those TV stations that have a gentleman who is, if you're having a problem with so-and-so and they did a bad job for you, you can call them. I'm really tempted to talk to him.
Yeah, do it. I would raise as much hell as possible. I'd reach out to the local newspaper. I'd reach out to the local radio and TV stations. Try to get somebody on the story, because you want to know, was this, how did this happen, and did it happen just to Democrats?
They said there were about 200 ballots that were affected.
Only 200? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. See, and that's the thing. In an area where there's about 1 million voters in the Omaha, Nebraska area, 200 seems a teeny bit low.
Yeah.
As to what could have been done.
Well, this is a story a reporter needs to dig into.
Yeah, it takes one person putting a ballot in the wrong envelope, and that's all it takes.
Yeah.
And most of us are not looking at the envelope and scrutinizing that teeny tiny little number that's on the back of that.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Looking at the ballot,
Sandra, let me know how it works out, okay?
Yeah, I will. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Elaine in Quebec, you want to try it again?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, you're on the air.
Hello? Okay, good. I only have one question for you. Throughout history, there were people that became so toxic or radioactive that they couldn't be killed, they couldn't be exiled, they couldn't be put in jail. So they were declared persona non grata, and nobody were allowed to talk to them or to do business with them. I wonder if this is what could happen with Trump and his family.
Excuse me. I think it already has, to a large extent. The value of Trump properties has dropped to the point that a number of places that had just been basically leasing his name have taken his name off their buildings. I don't know. I'd be reluctant to live in a Trump property, wouldn't you?
I'm not rich enough for that.
Yeah. So you think, beyond that, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by the question, Elaine.
But what I mean is that simply, like, nobody will want to do business or even to be associated to the point that he will have to leave the country and probably go to Saudi Arabia or something.
I doubt it's going to get that bad, because there's this right-wing base in America that will always be loyal to Donald Trump no matter what, and there's enough of those people, particularly enough rich people like that I don't think that it's gonna get to that, but it should. I agree with you, Elaine. Thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Brian in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Brian, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Last couple of days, we're talking about the growing societal violence and bullying. And I just wanted to make the point. I'm a big picture guy. I love history. I think that's kind of the story of mankind since the beginning of written history. Like, I think about the area I live right now. Imperial Spain came over here with the Catholic Church, and they didn't come so much to spread the good news of Jesus. It was about treasure and resources and extraction and domination. And, the church was kind of the sidecar, and it was, hey, our God's more powerful than your God. We've got God representative with us right here. He's going to tell you how to behave and what you're going to do for us. And if you don't agree with this, well, we'll beat you, turn you into a slave, or we'll just kill you. So there's your options. And the same can be said for the British Empire and the Russian Empire and the French Empire and the Vikings. And it's just kind of, it goes on and on. But
it's only half the story, though, Brian. The other half of the story
but it's a big part of it.
is told by Graeber and Wengrow in their book, The Dawn of Everything, that the majority of humanity, actually, at the time of first contact in the 1600s, was living egalitarian. They weren't under the domination of bullies. It was tribal people all over the world, but apparently the majority of them were practicing what we would call democracy.
Yeah, but they did fight amongst themselves. I've been doing some reading. I mean, the Aztecs didn't get along with everybody.
Oh, the Aztecs were just as bad as the Spanish, as were the Mayans. But I'm talking about
the human animal. The human animal is tribal, and religion is a component to that tribal belief.
Absolutely,
it's the It describes the history of our tribe, the justification for our tribe, the future of our tribe. So I wish we would talk more about accurately describe what's going on in the world, like the Middle East, for example. It's basically religious tribal warfare is what it is, but we won't call it out.
No, it absolutely is.
And it's been going on for eons.
Yep.
If you drew a 100-mile circle around Jerusalem, how many battles do you think have been fought in that little bitty area?
Way too many. Way too many. I'm with you. Brian, thank you for the call. We'll continue the conversation on the other side of this break. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Right back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option. And welcome back. Kathy in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Hey, Kathy, what's on your mind today?
The election information that you had from, I think the woman said she was from Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how it works in Wisconsin.
Oh, interesting. How does it work there?
Well, first of all, we don't have to register as Democrats or Independent or whatever. We just don't.
Oh, you have open primaries?
No. No. I vote absentee, but I used to be an election worker. Mm-hmm. So this is how it works. I get a ballot in the mail, and I get an orange direction sheet that says in great big letters, you may only vote for one party.
Mm-hmm.
This is a primary.
Mm-hmm.
If I had gone to the polls, the machine would have spit it out. And we would have explained to the person, well, you voted for a Republican and a Democrat, and you can't. This is the primaries. You can't do that.
Right. So instead of having two ballots, you have one ballot, and people are only able to fill out half of it, essentially.
That's it. And then it goes into a read. And it doesn't matter if it's an absentee ballot or if it's at the poll ballot.
Right.
It goes into a machine that reads it, because we have those little fill in the circle ballots.
Right.
So the machine reads it, but when the machine reads it, it takes a picture of the ballot. So when I gave out a ballot to somebody who came to the polls, I would look up their name in the book, and there would be, my partner would also look up the name in the book. They would get a number. Let's say the number is 36. That 36 would go on the ballot, and it would be recorded in both of those books. So when the machine read the ballot, it also took a picture of it. And on the ballot it said 36. If somebody wanted to figure out who I voted for, they could do. It would take a lot, because those ballots are then sealed up, and they aren't unsealed unless somebody asks that there be a recount.
Right.
But it would take a lot to figure it out, and I don't care. Myself, because I'd tell anybody who asked.
Right.
I do not vote for Republicans for the most part. I voted for a Republican sheriff at one time, but he was a relative, and he was a good guy.
Yeah.
But I think it works differently in different states, and it works differently in different jurisdictions, because if you don't have that reader. Brown County, which is where Green Bay is, I think all over the county it has those ballot readers.
Yeah.
But I'm sure some places don't, or they have different machinery.
Yeah, we really need some national standards.
It seems like it would be a really good idea to just standardize elections. Of course, then you may be, introducing national vulnerabilities too. Maybe there's some benefit to diversity.
Well, you can have national standards, but still have elections run locally.
That's true.
So you could have a standard that says, well, you already have a standard. You have a standard that says nobody under the age of 18 can vote.
Correct. You're right. You're right.
So, or you have to be a citizen to vote. In Wisconsin, we now have voter ID.
Yeah.
But, you already have standards. A few more is not going to make a difference.
I'm with you. Kathy, thank you. That was fascinating. I appreciate the information.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much for sharing it. It's 10 minutes before the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Stay tuned. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, your media support group for We the People. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Recently, I did an op-ed and a little rant here about what happens when you raise the top income tax rate on morbidly rich people to 90%, and how, that helps reduce income inequality and funds the government, all kinds of good, positive things. What about corporate taxes? We really need to go back to the 50% top corporate income tax rate that we had under Dwight Eisenhower, for example. The reason why is not on the assumption that we're going to collect all that money, but what it does is it causes corporations to change their behavior, to do things to try to get tax deductions so they don't have to pay that in taxes. And what are the main things they do? They develop new products. They do research and development. They become more competitive. They open up new stores. They pay their employees better. They offer better benefits. All of these things are 100% tax deductible and thus lower their corporate income taxes and help out America. You can read all about it over at hartmannreport.com. Welcome back. 9 minutes before the hour, picking up your calls here. Bill in Veneta, Oregon. Am I saying that right? I've not been to that town.
Yeah, Veneta is just outside of Eugene.
Okay.
Yes. Halfway between there and the coast. So I just had a real quick thing on the cell phones. I drive a truck up and down I-5, and sometimes when you get too close to the border in Canada, if you don't turn your data off, if you have a U.S. plan, it'll pick up a cell tower in Canada, and you get some crazy charges.
Oh, really?
They say it's not supposed to happen, but it does, and I don't know if it's certain areas, but it has happened to me before. And so I just added the Canadian plan just to make sure, which only cost me a couple dollars a month. But you got to be careful. I mean, it's not just over other countries, and I don't know if that happens across the U.S., across the border, but it definitely happens up by Canada for sure.
Isn't that interesting? So, I'll bet it happens, in northern Vermont, too, where I used to live. Yeah, that's fascinating, Bill.
Yeah,
Bill,
and I didn't notice it until the bill looked really high one day, and I looked at it, and it showed on there, and so what their suggestion was is if you get close, turn your data off and try not to use your phone, as you're close. But, but I took care of that for about $5 a month. So
fascinating.
Just a public service announcement to people to be aware.
Okay, Bill, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. And thanks for listening to us on Sirius XM. Anthony in Detroit, Michigan. Hey, Anthony, what's up?
Hi. Love your program. Been listening to it for way over 10 years.
Thank you.
Yes, you give out great information. I appreciate you. I was calling because you had did a podcast segment on Dick Durbin, and I tried to save it because I take your podcast, I'm subscribed to your podcast, and I understand as you talk about, you can go back and go back on some of your previous shows, and I'm looking for the one that you spoke about, Dick Durbin, the Senate leader, the Judiciary Committee.
I'm sorry, I don't remember, Anthony, when that would be, but what question did you have about Dick Durbin? I'm in most ways a big Dick Durbin fan.
Yeah, the question was, what he can do, he got the authority and the tools to do in respects to Clarence Thomas. And it's another thing you spoke about that's been in place for a long time. I don't know if that got something to do with the filibuster or something like that, that he can change some rules that's been in place for
Yeah,
years.
the filibuster is a Senate rule, and the Senate rules can be amended with a simple majority vote, but it's a process that would have to be driven by the actual Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, not Dick Durbin. Dick Durbin is the head of is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, through which all of the judicial nominees and some other nominees flow, and Durbin, he's got oversight of the judiciary, the federal judiciary, and his committee recently issued a subpoena to Harlan Crow and Leonard Leo, the people that are accused of bribing essentially Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito. And they both said, screw you, I'm not going to come. So the question now is whether Dick Durbin is going to try to enforce the subpoena, whether he's going to go to a court and ask them to be held in contempt of Congress. And so far we don't know, but if Dick Durbin represents you, you live in Detroit, he doesn't, but for our listeners in Illinois, might be a good time to call Dick Durbin's office and say, please enforce your subpoena. These billionaires should not be able to get away with buying off our federal judiciary, with bribing our members of the court. It's just wrong. So, did that answer your question, Anthony?
Now, you had some other criticism of him. You had some other things that I wish I could remember.
I had criticized him at one point for still respecting the blue slip rule. The blue slip rule
that's what I want to know.
Yeah, is where...
It's called what again?
It's called the blue slip rule, and what it is basically is it gives every senator has the right or the power, I guess, and this is a tradition, not an actual rule, has the power to sabotage any nominee from their state. So whenever a liberal from a state that has a Republican senator gets appointed, the Republican senator will refuse to allow that liberal to go onto the court. Dick Durbin has been respecting that rule. When the Republicans were in charge of that committee, I don't recall who specifically was, but when the Republicans were in charge of that committee during the Trump administration, they ignored the blue slip rule. And I've been encouraging or trying to encourage Dick Durbin. I mean, he doesn't come on the program to talk to me, but to the extent indirectly that I can, to ignore the blue slip rule and let some of these good liberal judges, even though they come from states that have Republican senators who want to sabotage them, let them on the bench. Anthony, I got to run, but that's it. That's pretty much my only criticism of Dick Durbin. He's a very effective legislator. He's done a great job for Illinois over the years, and I have a lot of respect for him. We'll be back on the other side of this break with my colleague Dean Obeidallah. Is it time for Donald Trump to go to jail for jury tampering? Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We say fight back!
Pat Mitchell. It's titled Becoming a Dangerous Woman, Embracing Risk to Change the World. This is from the preface titled The Most Dangerous Woman in the Room. Yes, I'll be there. Eve Ensler was calling with an invitation to what she described as the meeting of movements, planned for the first week of January 2017. In the wake of a polarizing presidential election in the United States, Eve had decided it was time for activists to come together to shape strategies that would unify and leverage the collective power of a wide range of social justice organizations. Who else is coming, I asked. I'm not releasing the invitation list, Eve replied, but you'll want to be in the room. Indeed, I did want to be in that room, knowing from past experiences that any meeting or event that Eve organized would be meaningful. So I showed up, as the invitation indicated, at a nondescript building in Stone Ridge, New York, and surrendered my cell phone to the smiling young volunteers at the front door. Best to have all communication devices outside the room, was the explanation, which of course heightened my anticipation about what would transpire within the room. I entered a large room and saw Eve standing at the front with folding chairs in a circle. Mingling about the room were some familiar faces, the meeting's other conveners, Kimberly Crenshaw of the African American Policy Forum, Naomi Klein, award-winning author and activist, independent media entrepreneur and journalist Laura Flanders, and Jane Fonda, actor and activist. We were asked to find our seats, and Eve began. "We are living in dangerous times," was her opening line, and such times call for new levels of activism from all the communities represented in this room. Let's begin by identifying who's in the room. One by one, the introductions began. I'm one of the founders of the Women's March. I'm the executive director of 350.org. I run Project South. With each introduction, the level of leadership and activists' credentials became more impressive and, for me, more intimidating. I could feel my anxiety building. How was I going to identify myself? I have no title and was no longer running an organization, having left my CEO position at the Paley Center for Media the previous spring. I could say that I was the CEO of Pat Mitchell Media with its grand total of 2 employees, including myself, but that felt wholly inadequate to explain why I belonged in that room. I mentally rehearsed some other options. I could say I was a lifetime advocate for women, true enough if a little vague. I could list some of my previous titles, but why make a point of being the former anything? I was struggling to come up with how to identify myself in the present, an identity that would hopefully give some indication of why Eve had included me in this circle of activists and leaders. Finally, it was my turn. Before I knew it, I heard myself saying, "I'm Pat Mitchell, and I'm a dangerous woman." I'm not sure exactly what prompted this personal declaration of dangerousness, but I could tell from the looks of surprise that I needed to add a bit more context. At this time in my life, about to turn 75, I continued, I have nothing left to prove, less to lose, and I'm ready to take more risks and to be less politic and polite. As Eve said, these are dangerous times, and dangerous times call for dangerous women. That got a big sisterly yes from Eve and others in the circle, including Jane Fonda, who was sitting across from me, and stood up declaring, "Well, I'm older than my friend Pat, so that makes me even more dangerous." Laughter erupted, of course, and I could sense that others were contemplating exactly what becoming more dangerous to meet the challenges of dangerous times would mean for each of us and for the work we had convened to consider. Certainly, Jane Fonda's life of activism is a textbook case for being bold and brave. During our many years of friendship, I've witnessed her willingness to take risks for a good cause, to speak out and show up, even when it meant personal peril or sacrifice. At 81, she is still on the front lines, campaigning for domestic and restaurant workers' rights, standing with the American Indian communities, protesting natural resource exploitation at Standing Rock, and busier as an actor than ever. In her book, Prime Time, Jane advanced the idea that older women have the potential to become the most powerful population on the planet. She's a great example of how we embrace that potential at every age. My personal potential for becoming dangerous is perhaps more directly linked to my friendship with Eve Ensler. From our first conversation in war-torn Sarajevo in 1998, I've been deeply inspired by her courage and her commitment to do whatever is necessary to end violence against women everywhere. Taking risks comes easier to Eve than to many. Writing and performing the Vagina Monologues, making it the centerpiece of a global movement, V-Day, to end gender-based violence, is a transformative approach to activism that I feel privileged to have experienced. Yes, I was an activist and woman's advocate before I met Eve, but through my relationship with her and as a board member of the V-Day movement, I've met activists facing dangers every day to create change in some of the most difficult places on earth to be a woman. But until that day, I had not felt dangerous myself. Declaring myself a dangerous woman still feels a bit, well, dangerous. And I readily admit to some second thoughts about declaring it even more widely and boldly as the title of this book. But every day since that convening, I'm discovering more about what being dangerous means in my life and why I believe that it's time for us, women and the men who stand with us, at whatever age or place in life's journey, to embrace risks and engage with renewed passion and collective purpose in making the world a safer place for women and girls. Pat Mitchell, Becoming a Dangerous Woman.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So one of my favorite Substack newsletters, welcome to the third hour of our program, by the way. One of my favorite Substack newsletters is called the Dean's Report. You can just go over to Substack.com and plug in Dean's Report and it'll come right up. It's Dean Obeidallah's newsletter. He's a colleague of mine, and his show comes on from 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time right here on Sirius XM Channel 127, Progress. He's also a columnist with CNN.com and a contributor to the New Republic. You can find his website, deanobeidallah.substack.com, or Dean Obeidallah on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. Dean, welcome back to the program. So you're writing in your brilliant Dean's Report about how MAGA is attempting to tamper with the Trump jury right in front of our eyes. Tell me about this.
Sure, and I wrote that before what we've seen with Jesse Waters on Fox News.
Yeah, that was
going
insane.
Through each of the jurors that were impaneled, and then Donald Trump clearly violating the gag order and attacking the jurors. Before that, I was talking about on Tuesday, right when the first jurors were brought in, you had Congressman Byron Donalds go on Newsmax on actually Monday night he's on, and saying, if you get on the jury in Manhattan, this is a trash case, vote not guilty. So a sitting Republican member of Congress, a MAGA congressperson, telling people, if you're in New York, and then you had even worse was Clay Travis, a Fox News contributor. He tweeted saying, if you're in Manhattan, try to get on this jury and do the same thing. Vote not guilty, vote to acquit, and have a hung jury, because that's the most patriotic thing you can do.
Isn't that a crime, Dean?
It's not, because it's, look, I went and looked at the New York law. If they said that specifically to a juror who was sworn in as a juror, or to a prospective juror who they were speaking to directly, it would be a crime. When you do this in general, you get a First Amendment protections, and they know this. Even though Congressman Eric Swalwell pointed out, who's a former prosecutor, this is jury tampering. I think he viscerally were upset. We know this, what in their spirit, what they're doing is jury tampering. There's no doubt. If they send an email to someone who was on the jury with these words, yes, that's a crime, no doubt about it. If they called that person up and said, do this. If they tweeted at that person knowing they were on the jury or a prospective juror, absolutely a crime. They were one step removed. And but here's the thing, Tom, if they're doing this publicly, what is MAGA doing privately that we don't know about?
Right.
Like, what's going on with MAGA people? Just like in my article, I go through what John Gotti did in his trials, intimidating witnesses, paying off a juror, convincing a juror to withhold information, say you don't know Gotti and you don't know friends of Gotti. The guy gets on the jury, then they give him $60,000 and he causes a hung jury in one of Gotti's cases.
Right, he got off twice.
Gotti was, he was a Teflon Don until he wasn't a Teflon Don. He was finally convicted because the jury was not tampered with and there was no witnesses intimidated. Have a fair trial. Donald Trump is a convicted felon by June. That's the that's what it looks like, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Last night on Fox News, Jesse Waters laid out enough of the details of one of the jurors that she had relatives calling her up going, he's describing you. Are you on the jury? And, and then she came in this morning and she didn't say, I'm so intimidated I'm running, but she said, it looks like I've been outed and I don't think I can be impartial based on that. Do you expect that people are going to start saying to the judge, I feel intimidated now that Fox News has gone after us? And if so, is there, what can he do about this?
Well, today, Judge Marchand said to the media, use your common sense. There's a lot
you think
of
Fox News is going to pay attention to that?
No, and Fox News is the least concerning. What about Breitbart? What about Gateway Pundit? What about Newsmax?
Yeah.
Further right, less responsible people. Because all the media, let's be honest, it's not just Fox News, Political, ABC News, all of them. I was reading, just from curiosity, the descriptions yesterday about the jurors that have been in panel. There were 7. And this was just good faith news reporting. Then you have the more sinister intent. So what Fox News did was completely legal. Was the intent of Jesse Waters, though, to inform MAGA to go threaten jurors? Maybe, maybe not. Are there bad faith actors? Absolutely. And that's the concern. That's what the judge said, use your common sense today. But look, Tom, the case law is very clear. It falls on the side of allowing the media to report not the names of the jurors. It's an anonymous jury. But these other facts until the judge goes no more. And I hope we don't get to a point where jurors actually don't serve. And think about where we are, Tom. Just this discussion we're having, we're talking about this trial like it's a mob trial, like it's the trial of a terrorist leader. And the reality is, it is. Donald Trump is a mobster. He is a leader of a terrorist movement known as MAGA. And it's unreal that he's also the Republican nominee for president in 2024, the leader of their party. So we are talking about this just like we would about a trial of an ISIS leader or a mob leader, a John Gotti or Vinny the Chin, the guys here in New York. Same thing, because that's what we're dealing with. And Trump is happy with that, and the GOP is fine with it. And that is far more concerning to me.
Yeah, I get it. So last night when Trump retweeted Jesse Waters, correct me if I'm wrong here, but reading the gag order, it says you may not, speak about these jurors. And he explicitly claimed that one of the jurors, at least, was a plant, basically a Democratic plant, and that seems like a clear violation of the gag order. Now the judge has said he's going to wait until Tuesday to decide what to do. Is he giving Trump a lot of rope, and then he's going to hang him with it on Tuesday, or is he just whiffing on these things, because he's I suppose trying to avoid an appealable verdict or something like that? What's going on? Why?
Look, Judge Marchand here, and when I was a lawyer, I never appeared before him, so I can't speak on personal information, but from others who have, and I know many who have, they've gone on TV or even lawyers I knew, very highly respected, no nonsense, a tough judge, but a nice judge, like a gentleman. So I think he's waiting. He wants to clarify the whole gag order thing before the opening statements actually begin, before it's too late. Right. And look, the gag order is very clear. Trump is forbidden from, quote, making or directing others to make public statements about any prospective juror or any juror in a criminal proceeding. What did Trump post yesterday? They are catching undercover liberal activists lying to the judge in order to get on the Trump jury. It doesn't matter he quoted Jesse Waters. He wrote that out, then put Jesse Waters' quote. That's a statement by Donald Trump. And what he's saying to his supporters are, these people on the jury are corrupt. Jesse Waters used the term rigged yesterday. I watched the Fox News statement. He said it's a rigged jury already. The Trumpers, they know what that means. That means jump into action. That means if you find a juror, you got to go up to them and say, you got to be honest, or worse, you threaten them like they do in the Gotti case or on The Sopranos. These mobsters through years on television and in real life have done this. This is exactly what Trump wants. So I'm hoping Judge Marchand next week holds Trump in contempt. Today, the prosecutor said, we've had 7 violations of the gag order. He literally pleaded to the judge saying, this has to stop. It has to put an end to it. So it's not like the prosecutors aren't pushing Judge Marchand. I think next week, I hope the judge lays out very clearly, so there's due process. Here is the schedule. 1 violation, it costs you this. 2nd violation costs you this. And then we get to, you're going to go to jail for 24 hours. You're going to go to jail for 3 days, a week. So everybody knows it. So everyone in the public knows it. Fox News knows it. So when Trump violates it and he goes to jail, it's like you were warned and you had 2 or 3 other warnings. You had to pay a fine. Now you're going to jail. It takes a lot for a judge to put any defendant in jail and take their liberty away from making a statement, as opposed to a statement which is a real threat directly, yes, but the general one. So it's got to lead up to it, and that's what we're getting to. I really wish the judge would have held him in contempt already, though,
Yeah.
for the earlier violations.
I agree. I want I want him to get his ass kicked, basically. But
yeah.
You also wrote a piece. This is on April 12th, titled "Trump is planning to use his criminal trial the same way Hitler did. That's why the Democrats must counter his lies." Lay that out for us.
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of people know this. Adolf Hitler, after the Beer Hall Putsch in 1923, he used his trial to get better known, to share his vile views, to attack the institutions, saying they were corrupt. And
yeah, he was just locally famous. He used the trial to become nationally famous.
So he got to spew his garbage. He got much better known, goes to jail for a much shorter time, about a year, not 5 years, writes Mein Kampf, comes out, and it catapults. That trajectory leads him to be chancellor 10 years later in 1933. Donald Trump is using from that same playbook every day before he goes in the courtroom, every lunchtime, every night. This is rigged. It's a Joe Biden orchestrated trial. This is all Joe Biden doing this. And what's the Democrats' response? Silence. Silence in the face of a message that we're going to hear every day, amplified every single day, is a mistake. I don't expect Joe Biden, nor do I want Joe Biden to respond to this. But I would like Democrat surrogates to come out and make it clear, the facts. It simply is this criminal investigation of Donald Trump began in 2018 when Trump was president, because Michael Cohen pled guilty and told prosecutors on the record he did it for Donald Trump.
Right.
I mean, this is what began all of this. The simplest facts there. And it's not going to change MAGA's mind, but I don't care the mindset of people who supported a guy who attempted a coup and incited a terrorist attack. We're not going to change their mind. Don't waste your time trying to change their mind. It's people in the middle who might think, hey, you know what, maybe it is rigged. We don't hear Democrats saying it's not. Maybe this is how politics is today. You prosecute your opponent, it's no big deal. It is a big deal. We can't allow this to be normalized.
Amen. Amen. The great Dean Obeidallah. Dean, thanks. DeanOfRadio.com as well. Yeah, thanks a lot for dropping by. Check out his newsletter. Just go over to Substack.com and plug in Dean's report. It'll pop right up.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
16 minutes past the hour. Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Thomas in Greenville, North Carolina. Hey, Thomas, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good afternoon, Tom. How are you?
I'm well. What's up?
That's good. I just wanted to ask you, do you think Joe and Hunter's shady deals with Burisma, Ukraine, and China will play a part in his election? And if they do rig it up for him, will he make it 4 more years? Or will Kamala Harris have to take the reins?
Yeah, I get it. You know, neither Joe Biden nor Hunter Biden actually ever went to Ukraine. Hunter was on Burisma's board, and he got paid for that.
Are you correct, dude?
I beg your pardon?
Kidding me? You got to be kidding me.
No, he never went to Ukraine.
They never went to Ukraine?
No, he never went to Ukraine.
Joe never went to Ukraine and made...
Joe Biden went to Ukraine when he was there to stand with Zelensky, but I'm talking about when his son was on the board of Burisma. Neither one of them went to Ukraine for that. That was done from within the United States, number one. Number two, all of the charges that there was some sort of a bribe being paid to them have been shown to be Russian disinformation. These were lies that literally came out of the Russian intelligence service that were laundered through Facebook and Twitter that apparently you've bought into. Certainly most most Republicans have bought into. So no, I don't think that it's going to influence anything. You know, it's been revealed to be BS.
How about the quid pro quo?
I am wondering, though, if the millions of dollars in patents that Ivanka got and the $2 billion that Jared Kushner got out of their time in the White House, if that's going to have any influence on the election. I would think so. I mean, it's clearly, I mean, taking $2 billion and then Ivanka taking, you know, tens or maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in goodies from China, that's got to reflect badly on Donald Trump. Don't you think, Thomas?
He sells shoes. What does Hunter sell? He sells shoes. What does Hunter sell?
Who's selling what? No, Ivanka was given patents by the Chinese government that are worth enormous amounts of money.
Okay, but what about the quid pro quo?
What do you mean, okay? What's the quid pro quo there? What did Donald Trump do? What did he give to China in exchange for China showering gifts on his daughter?
He didn't give Jinping nothing. He just gave him.
I think he did.
Fact that
I think he might have sold out our country. I think he might have been selling them secrets. It might be why he was stealing all those documents from the White House.
That's your boy Joe, where y'all rigged the election. That's your boy Joe that sold us out.
Yeah,
that's
again, you're echoing Russian propaganda and BS coming out of the GOP. There was no rigged election. The election was just fine. 60 different courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, looked at that and said there's nothing wrong with this election.
Tell me the honest truth. Do you think this decrepit old Alzheimer's patient is fit to be in office?
No, I don't think Donald Trump is fit to be in office. I really don't.
No, I'm talking about your fucking spinster.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You can't use language like that on the phone, on the air, Thomas, and let me flag him for future calls here. So, it's sad. For some reason, right wingers always feel the need to swear. Oh my. Yeah. There we go. All righty. So, I've got 5 seconds. So we'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls. Just stay tuned. Actually, I've got a couple of stories here, and then we'll pick up your calls. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So a lot of people are wondering, why is it in America that we can't have nice things? Why don't we have, the same things every other democracy has? Every other democracy in the world has a national health care system of some form, and everybody is covered. We don't. We've got 27 million uninsured people and over 100 million underinsured people. Why is that? Why is it that every other country in the world offers college education very inexpensively, if not for free, and for here you go to debt? Why is it that we've got our public schools crumbling and other countries are doing well? Why is it that we've got Medicare being taken apart by this Medicare Advantage scam and nobody will do anything about it? Well, it turns out the reason why it boils down to one thing, one Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, legalizing the bribery of our politicians. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. I think you're going to find it very, very useful. Check it out. Welcome back. So Donald Trump is grifter alert. Donald Trump is saying to any Republican in the country who wants to say, I'm a Trump Republican, I like Trump, I will support Trump, I've been endorsed by Trump, whatever. If they're going to mention his name, use his picture, use his endorsement, any of that stuff, then 5% of the money they bring in has to go into Donald Trump's back pocket. Nice work if you can get it, right? He's licensing his name, just like he licensed his name to hotels and things. This from Alec Eisenstadt over on Politico. In a letter received by Republican digital vendors this week, the Trump campaign is asking for down-ballot candidates who use his name, image, and likeness in fundraising appeals to give at least 5% of the proceeds to the campaign. They add, quote, any split that is higher than 5% will be seen favorably by the RNC and President Trump's campaign and is routinely reported to the highest levels of leadership within both organizations. In other words, you can get Donald Trump to like you even better if you give him even more money. Which, of course, I mean, this is why the Saudis booked an entire floor of rooms at the Trump Hotel and then never used them, right? As a way of transferring a couple $100,000 into Donald Trump's back pocket. It's why the Russians are, bought so many of, the floors of apartments in Trump Tower. It's a way of giving Donald Trump money. It's a way of getting his love back in response for it. So, yeah, grifter alert. Meanwhile, in Maine, this is good news. Maine has been taken over by Democrats. Democrats now hold the governor's office, the House, and the Senate. This is a relatively recent phenomena. It doesn't necessarily bode well for Susan Collins, although she is, kind of meaner. But their state legislature approved sweeping gun safety legislation, including background checks on private gun sales, waiting period for gun purchases, criminalizing gun sales to prohibited people. All real reasonable stuff. This was, 6 months ago, there was this horrible, deadly shooting in Maine. People had been warned by family members that the shooter was becoming delusional and had access to weapons. His best friend, a fellow reservist, warned that he was going to snap and do a mass shooting. He killed himself after the attack, by the way. But it was in Lewiston, Maine, Maine's second largest city, and it was back on October 25th, this mass shooting. And so, they're doing something about it. They strengthened the state's yellow flag law. They boosted background checks for private sales of guns. The bill also funds violence prevention initiatives and opens a mental health crisis receiving center in Lewiston. This is the city where they had that horrific mass shooting. So a lot going on there, just FYI. All right, so what's on your mind today? Let's pick up your calls. Carol in Seattle. Hey, Carol, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, I had signed up for U.S. Postal Service. It's called Inform Delivery. And you can do an app or go to the website, and it shows you what's in your mailbox or what's coming, and it's really nice. You can also stop your mail, on that same website.
Yeah, I've done the same thing.
I like it because you know when something's coming, such as your ballot. So I think that would be a nice heads up to make sure it gets from point A to point B.
Yeah,
for an extra tool.
It is, and it's probably the one good thing that Louis DeJoy has done in the what six years or so, 7 years that he's been running the post office.
Exactly.
He's slowing down the mail and destroying high-speed sorting machines and consolidating offices and doing everything he can to prepare the post office to be sold to FedEx or UPS or highest bidder. I mean, he owns a trucking company that's a contractor with the post office, so maybe he intends to bid on it too. I don't know. But that app, I appreciate getting an email every morning with a picture of all the mail that I got coming. Carol, thank you for the call.
Yeah, what's coming? Thank you for everything.
Yep, my pleasure. 27 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with your calls on the other side of this break. Stay with us, 202-808-9925, and I'll be picking up your calls in just a minute.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls right after this.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Under the Influence, Putting Peer Pressure to Work by Robert H. Frank. And I'm reading from the prologue. That we are more closely connected to one another than most of us realize is an old idea. An important variation dates from 1929 when Hungarian writer Frigyes Karinthy published a short story entitled Chains. Two of the story's main characters speculate that any two living people can be connected by a chain involving no more than 5 acquaintances. That some such chains exist is hardly surprising, since most of us can think of people in distant locations to whom we're connected through a small number of intermediaries. The man bites dog aspect of Karinthy's conjecture is that almost any two people, A and E, could be linked by a chain like A knows B, B knows C, C knows D, who knows E. One of the first systematic attempts to test this claim came in the 1960s with a series of experiments by the psychologist Stanley Milgram. In it, he sent packages containing a small booklet to 96 people chosen at random from the Omaha, Nebraska telephone directory. His cover letter asked them to try to forward the booklet to a specific residence of Boston, Massachusetts, through a chain of personal acquaintances. He told them the name and address of the Boston resident, that he worked as a stockbroker, and that the first person in their chain should be somebody they knew on a first-name basis. Milgram also advised them to choose someone they believed, presumably based on the target's location and occupation, could be socially closer to the target than they were themselves. Subsequent recipients in the chain were asked to forward the same instructions. Many of the Omaha recipients undoubtedly tossed Milgram's booklet in the trash, so it's remarkable that the Boston target received 18 of the 96 packages. The average number of links in the 18 chains was 5.9. But the now familiar expression 6 degrees of separation would not gain broad currency until many years later, when John Guare's play by that name premiered on Broadway in 1990. The concept became a meme in full when 4 Albright College students introduced 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon in 1994, a game designed to measure the professional proximity of an actor, living or dead, to the American film star Kevin Bacon. An actor has a Bacon number of 1, for example, if he or she appeared in the same film with Bacon. Someone who appeared in a film with another actor who appeared in a film with Bacon has a Bacon number of 2, and so on. The average Bacon number is 2.95 among actors who have one. In that group, even the actor most distant from Bacon, William Rufus Shafter, has a Bacon number of only 7. Shafter, a Union Army officer during the Civil War, appeared in 2 films in 1898. For academics who study social connectedness, the 6 degrees concept gained little traction until 1998. That's when the sociologist Duncan Watts and the mathematician Steve Straga published their landmark paper, Collective Dynamics of Small World Networks in Nature. In the years since then, this paper has provided the mathematical foundation for the analytical tools that social scientists have been using with such remarkable success to study how ideas and behaviors spread through populations like infectious diseases. It has already been cited by other scholars more than 38,000 times and is one of the few papers ever published to be among the most widely cited works in multiple disciplines. In his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins coined the term meme, which Webster now defines as an idea, behavior, style, or usage that spreads from person to person within a culture. The meme is to cultural transmission, Dawkins argued, as the gene is to biological transmission. One of Charles Darwin's central insights was that natural selection favors genetic variations that enhance the individual organism's ability to survive and reproduce. Much of the time, the same variations also benefit larger groups, but often not. For example, an inclination to cheat when no one's looking might benefit individuals, but widespread cheating almost always makes matters worse for groups. It is the same with memes. The memes that propagate most successfully are often ones that benefit both individuals and groups. But here too, not always. As the legal scholar Jeffrey Stake has argued, ideas should not be treated as inert products, but as living things that sometimes exert some influence over their environment. Some of the ideas are more adept at surviving than others, and the ones that survive will not necessarily be good for humans. It is often hard to evaluate whether a specific behavior even qualifies as a meme, and if so, whether its consequences on balance are positive or negative. Yet sometimes the evidence is clear. We know, for example, that the strongest predictor of whether people will take up smoking is the proportion of their close friends who smoke. Smoking is thus clearly a meme. The negative health consequences of smoking are also conclusively documented, and most smokers themselves express regret over having started. By definition, then, smoking unambiguously qualifies as a socially destructive meme. On the other side of the ledger, we have compelling evidence that the adoption of photovoltaic solar panels is both socially contagious and almost uniformly positive in terms of environmental consequences. Accordingly, few would object to calling the practice a socially beneficial meme. Adam Smith, widely considered the father of economics, is often cited in defense of the claim that competitive markets produce the greatest good for the greatest number. The book is Under the Influence by Robert H. Frank.
From international trade policy to immigration policy to housing, we've got all kinds of topics. The wars between Republicans and Democrats, the Republican efforts to induce fascism in the United States. A great selection of opinions will be found over at HartmannReport.com. You know, between 40 years of Ronald Reagan's neoliberalism destroying the American middle class and all the just horrors of January 6th and the Trump presidency, America's waking up, and that's a really good thing. There's actually, some books coming out about this. Mine, The Hidden History of Democracy. Neil Howe's The Fourth Turning is here. And it looks like a moment of American renaissance is upon us, if our media doesn't screw it up, which raises the question, can we have democracy and Fox News? Can the two coexist? Like, when Fox News runs chyrons saying that essentially Joe Biden is a wannabe dictator who's throwing Trump in jail because he's his political opponent. There's a whole rant about this and an in-depth analysis of what can we do with regard to repairing our media here in the United States over at HartmannReport.com. I think you'll find it interesting. Check it out. And welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Tom in Mossy Head, Florida. Hey, Tom, how's everything with you these days? Tom in Mossy Head, Florida? He's potted up? I'm not hearing him. All right, well, Tom's a regular caller. I'm going to put Tom on hold here. He's on line 2, Mark. You can find out what's going on with that. John in Niles, Michigan. Hey, John, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Tom. And again, God bless you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention all of the innocent children that have been killed got by Israeli airstrikes for the past month or so. And these children were just out trying to normalize their lives by playing amidst all the famine and dehydration and disease and lack of shelter and so forth. And the Jewish people, I have great sympathy for them because what they went through, I guess 6 million of them were killed at the hands of the Nazis.
Well, not just that. I mean, there's a long history of anti-Semitism and pogroms and whatnot. So it even goes beyond the Holocaust.
The Spanish Inquisition and all that. Well, anyway, Jewish people, of all people, should be aware of humanitarian crimes against any people. And I don't necessarily blame them because I think a lot of the Jewish people are aware of this. But it's Netanyahu and his right-wing generals. Actually, they actually started this through a false flag operation by removing troops at Gaza, which allowed, and they knew this, which allowed the Hamas to invade those.
Well, that has not been proven, John. There are a lot of people in Israel who are scratching their head going, why is it that for 7 hours nothing happened? Why is it that when Netanyahu had been warned a week earlier or 2 weeks earlier by Russia that this was coming, and apparently by several other countries, that he didn't, prepare for it, he didn't do anything? People are asking those questions, but you're making an assertion here that is, for which the evidence is not available.
Well, look at all the thousands of Israelis that were protesting in the streets right before this happened.
Yep.
I mean, it seems pretty damn clear to me. It seems pretty clear to me. And then that all went away after this, the Hamas invaded those Jewish communities. But, the old saying, you reap what you sow. This is not doing Israel any favors at all. The Western Europe and the United States, we're becoming disgusted with this. Again, not at the Jewish people, but against the right-wingers that are controlling
this has
Israel.
very, very little to nothing to do with Judaism or Islam, for that matter. What we've got are two factions, largely political factions here. Hamas being backed up by Iran and Netanyahu being backed, the Prime Minister of Israel, who are both engaging in illegal activities in order to cement their own power. From my point of view, it's both of them are weak. Netanyahu's got popularity ratings under 20%, and the mullahs are hated across Iran. And so, both of them think that a little war would probably help out.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Well, I just want to say, again, you reap what you sow, and I think what the Templars did centuries and centuries ago, 1,000 years ago, is and I used to be a big supporter of Israel, but I'm becoming less and less a supporter of Israel because this will never end. Yeah. There is no end game until the Israelis maybe move to Australia or something where they can live in peace. But this will never end. This will go on and on.
I think what we need is a rational, a rational government in Israel that's willing to compromise with some of the Arab states and work things out. And and I get it that in the past that's been very difficult. They've not had a good partner in the with the Palestinian leadership. But I think it could be fixed. I think the situation could be fixed.
Well, I hope it could be fixed, but I only see this as just never ending. And this, what they're doing to all these innocent people in Gaza is, I'm a Catholic, and I know that there's other religions, but this is just hurting the Israelis very badly. You reap what you sow. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, John. Gar in Atlanta. Hey, John. Hey, Gar. What's on your mind today?
How you doing today, Tom?
Good. What's up?
Good program.
Thank you.
But what I want to talk about is President Jimmy Carter.
Oh,
President Jimmy Carter is showing us how you lose. He lost after 4 years, and he did better work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, instead of whining and complaining, he went off and built houses for people. Oh. Well, that's weird.
They're doing a lot of good work. That's how you lose. You don't lose. Jimmy Carter could have did it January the 6th, but he was a bigger man than that.
Yeah.
He said, okay, you don't want me as president? I'll build houses for Americans who want, you know. And that's what I can't understand, why Democrats don't use. He's almost 100 years old, and Trump got 100 indictments.
Yeah.
Almost 100 indictments.
I'm with you, Gar. And on top of that, he got screwed. I mean, and he knows it. He came on my program and talked about it maybe 8 or 10 years ago. Reagan had cut a deal with the Iranians to hold on to the hostages to screw Carter, and it worked.
Yeah, but he didn't cry. He didn't cry.
No,
they tried to cheat me.
He didn't.
He did better work. Better work.
Yep.
And that's what Trump and his supporters need to hear.
Yeah.
How to lose.
Yeah.
You know, you always teach your children, be good losers. If you lose, I mean, get better next time. Mm-hmm. Don't be crying.
Republicans are not learning that lesson. They there's this kind of hubris, this arrogance associated with the GOP these days that, if they don't win elections, then things have to be rigged because they have the right to govern. They are the righteous leaders of this country. White Christians for all and all that kind of thing.
But my problem with that is with the Democrats is if Republicans had the Democrats' hand, just say Joe Biden did what Trump did, Joe Biden would be nowhere on the ballot because Democrats wouldn't put him on the ballot and the Republicans wouldn't let him put him on the ballot. But Democrats are letting Republicans put a guy like Trump on the ballot because they won't go ahead and slam dunk him. He needs to be slam dunk because, I mean, come on now. You don't want your kids to grow up to be like that. I mean, he's going to be on trial every day. Come on. Yeah. Jimmy Carter built houses for Americans.
Yeah.
He's not in court. He's almost 100 years old.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom, for taking my call. But Democrats, they should win every House seat, every Senate seat if they wanted to. Thank you.
You're right, Gar. Thank you very much for the call. Bill in St. Cloud, Florida. Hey, Bill, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
Nice to talk to you, Tom. Listen, we've been talking about Jimmy Carter a little today. A while ago, you stated your opinion for one of the reasons, at least, that he failed to be reelected for a second term. What was that? Do you remember?
Yeah, the Bill Casey with the Reagan campaign in early 1980 reached out to the Iranians and said, we'll ship you spare parts for your military, which they were desperately in need of, in exchange for your hanging on to the hostages until after the election. And this was over the objection of the then Iranian president, Abul Hassan Bani Sadr. And so Bani Sadr moved to the United States after that, 1980. I don't know what year he moved, but it was in the 80s. And, became like a professor at some college in the East Coast. He's passed away now. He just died a couple of years ago. And he went on the record. He did an interview with the Christian Science Monitor, or actually wrote an op-ed for them. It was about the movie Argo. But in that op-ed, he said, I ran on for president of Ukraine, or of Iran on the platform of releasing the hostages. I won on that platform, with 78% of the vote. And I tried to release the hostages, and I was told by the Ayatollahs that they had cut a deal with the Reagan campaign, and therefore they weren't going to release the hostages until Reagan put his hand on the Bible. And they literally did that. The minute that Reagan put his hand on the Bible was the minute that the hostages were released, to the minute, as their way of saying, yeah, we're keeping our deal with you, Ronnie. So is that what you were talking about, Bill?
No, I was around in those days, too. I remember that, and I agree with you to a point. But what sticks out in my mind from those days is the Mariel boat lift.
Oh, yeah.
Castro emptied
that didn't help either.
Yeah, that didn't help. It didn't help with my vote. I voted for Carter the first time, and I believe there was a third-party candidate against him in the second term by the name of John Anderson. I may be wrong there.
Yeah, I don't remember which election Anderson was in. It might have been that one. I don't recall either.
Yeah, Mariel was major news, not just in Florida, but all over the country.
Yeah, and then there was that. Was that when that little kid was? When the FBI went and got him out of his father's house and shipped him back to Cuba? Was that?
Yeah, I remember that was later.
Elian Gonzalez.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that too.
Was that during Carter's presidency? I don't recall. I'm sorry.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I believe it was a little bit after that, but I may be wrong.
Yeah.
The reason the Mariel thing is important is because there's a parallel today, at least in my way of thinking, and that is Trump versus Biden on the southern border.
Right.
And I believe that issue is based on people that I interact with constantly is the overriding thing going right now.
Yeah, this is the issue that the Republicans have. This is the biggest, in their minds, the biggest weapon that they have against Democrats. Democrats had the biggest weapon they have is abortion. But as soon as Joe Biden was elected, Republicans started yelling and screaming that the border was wide open. And so what happened was all these people from south of the border started coming up here going, oh, the border's wide open. Ted Cruz says so. It must be true. He's the senator from Texas. And say what?
I think I've heard 9 million have come into the country from, 24 different countries.
Yeah.
And guarantee there's some people in there we don't want here.
Probably.
That's just my take on that. That's why I believe Jimmy Carter got beat. It was his Christian duty to bring all these,
I think he was just following the law.
Turn them loose.
He was just following the law. It was Republicans who passed that law that said that if a Cuban sets foot, the wet foot, dry foot law, that if a Cuban sets foot on U.S. territory, they have to be given asylum automatically. They automatically get asylum. That was back in That was in the 80s during the Reagan administration that law got passed, Bill. Bill, I got to run, but thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
I guess Elian Gonzalez was in the year 2000. Anyhow, 47 minutes past the hour. Back with your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Debbie in Salt Lake City, Utah. Hey, Debbie, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I really enjoy listening to your program.
Thank you.
And you have a lot of political history that I am learning about. My question is, why does Bill Barr still have a law license?
That's a good question. He's still screwing things up. I mean, but he's been a fixer for the GOP for a long, long time. I mean, he got George Herbert Walker Bush out of a big problem, might have even sent him to prison. He got Donald Trump out of, the whole Russia investigation. He blew that up by hiding the Mueller report and lying to us about it.
Well, also, too, what he did to Michael Cohen.
Yeah, he sent Michael Cohen to prison for 3 years. Cohen served a year of it before they let him out.
They were going to send him back because Michael wanted to write the book.
That's right. You're right. That's right. I had forgotten that.
And also, too, Mike Johnson. I mean, if he's a lawyer, and he's the one that drew up all those papers about not letting Joe Biden be president.
Yeah, he was the leader, apparently, of the effort in the House and Senate to vote against the certification of Biden's presidency. He's as MAGA as you can get. He's, you know, as Trumpy as you can get, and it's going to be real interesting to see. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
He's very dangerous too. I was just listening to Bo of the Fifth Column talk about how all of a sudden now he's for Ukraine aid,
right,
and that he's going to be the next Mitch McConnell.
I think he's figured it out. I mean, you know, that this is the way the wind is blowing, and the majority of the Republican conference and all of the Democrats want that aid to Ukraine. My guess is that Mike Turner and Mr. McCall, the heads of the Senate or the House Intelligence and House Foreign Relations Committees, who have both gone on the record and said that we've got, you know, that there are Republicans in the House who are literally reciting Russian propaganda. I have a feeling the two of them sat him down and said, "Here's the facts of life, buddy," and and maybe some of Biden's intelligence officers, because he's now behaving like he wants to do something to help out Ukraine. And the other part of that, though, is that he's doing that in exchange for Democrats saying that they will defend his speakership against Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and Tom Massey. So, you know, it's getting weird. It's getting weird, Debbie.
Yeah, it scares me, but as a citizen, what can we do about getting them disbarred?
I don't know. I mean, you know, a lawyer could complain to the Bar Association. I imagine, you know, citizens can, but you'd have to have a fairly, you know, well-drawn legal complaint. If you're talking about Bill Barr, if you know, with regard to Mike Johnson, you know, that's Louisiana. You know, I'm not even sure he's using his law license. I mean, now he's a legislator, so maybe he wouldn't care. The main thing I think would be to have a Democrat run against him in Louisiana. He ran unopposed. That's how he got that seat. You know,
yeah, he needs to.
Yeah, he really needs somebody taking him on. Debbie, thank you for the call. It's 51 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds, right after I read this live read over on the commercial side of the show. Stay tuned. Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio, and tag you're it. You know, one of the grand questions that political scientists have been scratching their heads over for years in America is, why do right-wing billionaires fund anti-black history movements? Why are they pouring money into these people? Why are they funding anti-trans movements? I mean, what does this have to do with being a billionaire? Well, it turns out it has a lot to do with it, and here's why. Almost 30 million Americans lack health insurance. 37 million of us live in dire poverty. 1 in 5 of us are illiterate. 1/4 of Americans suffer from a diagnosable mental illness and can't get treatment. 316 people are shot every day in America. 44% of us carry student debt. And the billionaires don't want to pay income taxes to deal with any of these problems of society. That's the real issue. If they can get us fighting with each other over black history or over trans people or kids, they win. Then we're not talking about taxing them, raising their taxes to where they should be. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com that you can read and see all the stats and all the hot links. Check it out. And welcome back. 53 minutes past the hour, and Tom in Mossy Head, Florida. Hey, Tom, what's up?
Can you hear me okay now?
I can.
Cool. My bad. I had the phone muted, didn't know.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, I'm not high tech exactly. Anyway, have you heard since Trump's been sleeping in court, have you heard his latest nickname?
No. What is it?
The Nod Father.
Yeah, so much for Sleepy Joe, right? Joe Biden's traveling all over the country doing campaign events, and Donald Trump is nodding off in the courtroom. He apparently was nodding off this morning when the judge was reading jury instructions.
Yeah, I was at the doctor, so I come in late to get on your program and listen. I remember a lady kind of caught right in the middle of it where she was, something about her registration for the vote was kind of messed up. And I don't know if you remember, a while back I called you about, I went down and re-registered and forgot to fill out, if I was a Democrat or Republican or Independent, and they sent me a thing that said it wasn't valid, and I went back down and redid it, and then they sent me another letter, said I was trying to double vote.
Oh,
anyway.
Geez.
Yeah, it's been a while back. It just made me think of a long time ago. I'm originally from Tennessee, a little Udo town, and went to vote for the local sheriff. And it was kind of hinky. It wasn't even a building. It was kind of a pop-up tent with a couple of women sitting there taking your vote, and you fill out the ballot and put it in the shoebox, basically. Mm-hmm. And so I did my thing. That's kind of weak. And then the lady goes, "Who'd you vote for?" I said, "What?" She goes, "Who'd you vote for?" I go, "Isn't that my right to privacy?" She goes, "Well, if you don't tell me where I can mark it down, your vote don't count." Oh, holy cow, what is this? So I ended up getting a hold of a local legislator and ended up going clear to Nashville to speak to one of the. Yeah, and then they tried to say, well, it's too late for you to vote. Well, it pulled some strings and my vote did count. But that ain't right. They can't just, and I asked her, I said, are you work for the county or the voting department? She goes, "No, I'm just a volunteer."
Yeah. I
go, "Why would I tell you who I vote for? That's not legal, I don't think." Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, it's just something, like I told you before when they messed with me about not filling out my registration completely.
Have they nailed the guy that burned down your shed yet?
Yeah, there's three of them. Told you about it last time I talked.
Are you going to sue them?
Well, right now it's hung up in insurance. They're trying to evaluate what my loss was.
Okay, I got it. Tom, I'm out of time. I'm sorry, but thanks for the call. It's always so nice to hear from you. And I wish you the very best. Yep, good talking to you. And by the way, Elian Gonzalez, that incident was in 2000. That was Bill Clinton. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channel. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. So please get out there, get active, tag you're it. There's so much we've got to do. There's a big election coming up. Have a great afternoon. I'll catch up with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.